Good evening. The Charter Township of Plymouth Board of Trustees meeting for special meeting for Tuesday, May 7th, 2019 will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Trustee Heitman.
Here.
Trustee Dorshevitz.
Here.
Clerk Borba here. Trustee Dempsey.
Present.
Trustee Kermy.
Here.
Treasurer Clinton.
Here.
Supervisor Heisey.
Here.
All present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight's Pledge of Allegiance, we have with us tonight, I see in the back row, former Supervisor Maury Breen. Mr. Breen. Mr. Breen is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I don't think he can hear you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for being here tonight, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, approval of the agenda is item C.
Could I ask a point of clarification?
Certainly.
With regard to item 3 on the agenda, the EMS transport policy, could we take this as a non-action item tonight?
Yeah, that's fine. As you may recall, this meeting was originally scheduled to be a study session for the purpose, among others, of reviewing the EMS transport policy concept. We made it a special meeting for the purpose of addressing the PUD for Beck Road Hotel, and then, since it was a matter of convenience and somewhat necessity, we thought it would be helpful to have the fireworks ordinance second reading also on tonight's agenda. The EMS transport policy before you is exactly what you would have received had this been a study session. If you want to vote on it tonight, that would be fine with me, but we can certainly defer it to a later date and then use tonight as a study session.
I think that'd be really the wise thing to do, and I appreciate this accommodation, I guess, or understanding.
So do you need a second on that, or no?
I don't think we need a motion.
No?
Well, I don't think you have to do anything. We would just discuss it and not take
we
action.
just don't take a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Supervisor,
Mr. Heitman.
I move we approve the agenda.
Motion's been made by Trustee Heitman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Dempsey. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Item D is the approval of consent agenda. There's nothing on there tonight, so we're going to move on to item E, public comments and questions. This is not your only opportunity during the evening to ask questions or make comments. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. We do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. We also will encourage questions and comments on individual agenda items as long as they are germane to that particular topic. So at this point, are there any public comments or questions under item E?
If we're going to have a lot of discussion on transport, you want to...
No, we're going to stick with the agenda.
Stick with it?
Mary Wydell, Plymouth Township resident. My comments or questions actually are for the item on transportation. The document that was included with the packet today, one of my questions is, what is the patient transport that the Township Fire Department will be responsible for? Secondly, what is from time to time defined as? What is the geographic area that Huron Valley Ambulance is to cover? Where is the agreement that will define and cover HVA services? Can Plymouth Township residents see the proposed HVA agreement before it is signed? And on the ambulance companies, what was determined on the ambulance service proposals that were received last August? How many new hires in the fire department will be required to operate township-owned ambulance transportation services? What is the yearly salary for each new hire? How much does it cost each new hire for yearly training? How much are the indirect costs of each new hire, including all benefits and retirement costs? How many ambulance transportation vehicles will be required to purchase and total cost for them? This should consider that we should have more than we currently do to make up for the loss of not having HVA ambulance services available in the township. Otherwise, we will be paying for a decrease in service. What are the budgeted maintenance and repair costs for the ambulance transportation vehicles owned by the township? Does this include increased mileage for over 4 times the number of yearly runs that are anticipated? What is the breakdown of the different hospitals that the township transports to in 2018? There could be increased time and costs for transporting to hospitals that are further away. Will new buildings need to be constructed to house new ambulances? Budgeted annual costs of equipment and supplies needed for each transportation vehicle. The Plant Moran analysis of the township's financial benefit for taking on the medical transportation of patients to hospitals cited deficiencies in that key operational issues are addressed and that data is more thoroughly vetted. Included in the Plant Moran analysis is a list of 10 dates in 2018 where there were more than 3 concurrent incidents, and this exceeds the number of vehicles we currently have. So this is of serious concern because if we are reduced from having
Could you wrap it up, please?
the township's 3 vehicles plus HVA ambulances services down to just the 3 township vehicles, there is no way anyone can say that this is an improved situation for township's residents' safety.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else at this time? All right, we're going to move on to new business. Item F1, this is the Beck Road PUD. Mr. Gonzalez is here tonight along with Laura Haw. Laura, do you want to come up first? Looks like it.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. Laura Haw, Planning Director. The memo that's included in your packet is largely the same since the April 23rd Board of Trustees meeting when this was first presented. Since the time of that meeting, as I understand, 4 things have been accomplished. The first is the land combination has been approved and finalized and closed out. The township attorney has further reviewed the PUD contract and can speak more to that finalization. As I understand, the taxes have been paid to date. And the building department continues to work with the applicant on the establishment of the performance bond. And the applicant is here this evening, should you have any other questions. Thank you.
Has the applicant paid his taxes?
Yes.
Yes, and we have proof of that tonight, right? Okay. All righty. Anybody have any other additional questions for either Laura or Mr. Gonzalez? Any questions or comments from the audience?
Well, just I have a question about the performance bond. You said they're still working with the building department. I guess I didn't understand what that meant.
To my knowledge, and perhaps the township attorney can speak to the stage that this is in, but there has been a standard performance bond established that all applicants need to follow, and they're in the works of providing the specifications of that.
Yeah, the performance bond that the applicant submitted, in my opinion, did not sufficiently protect the township. Apparently, the developer hired a subcontractor to do certain work, and the subcontractor is the only person or the only entity listed as the principal under the bond. It's my preference that both the developer and the subcontractor be listed on the bond to be principals under the bond. That way, if the subcontractor flies away or otherwise becomes insolvent before the job is done, the township would have to sue a non-existent entity along with the bondholder. It's more prudent, and it protects the township better if both the developer and the subcontractor are on the bond, and that's basically what I asked for.
Okay, and Kevin, the motion before us, the model resolution, does provide, pending any additional adjustments to the legal documents by the township attorney. Are you comfortable with that language? Okay. All righty. Any other comments or questions by the board or the public at this point? Hearing none, then I would look for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor,
Mr. Clerk?
I move to approve Resolution 2019-05-0749 for PC application number 2274-0118 for final planned unit development, plan approval, Phase 1 only, contingent on the Planning Commission's recommendations that the final stamp plans are subject to the resolution of all the outstanding items noted in the April 11th, 2019 plan report and the March 21, 2019 engineering report, and that the new commercial structure and arch canopy over the two doors covers each door and the adjacent two window panes, and that the arch covers the entire drive-up window and sliding window, thus fulfilling the approved PUD option where the architecture of the building complements the existing buildings on site and pending any additional adjustments to the legal documents by the township attorney.
You want to read that again? I didn't get it all. No,
Okay, I'll read it backwards.
no. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Heitman. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Clerk Borba, yes. Treasurer Clinton,
Yes.
Trustee Kermy,
Yes.
Trustee Dempsey,
Yes.
Trustee Dorchevitz,
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey.
Yes.
Trustee Heitman,
Yes.
motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. Good luck.
you.
Item F2 is fireworks ordinance revision, second reading. We had our first reading at our last regular meeting, and in the interest of time, we thought it would be helpful to have this up here tonight since it is a special meeting and we can vote on things. So are there any other additional comments or questions for Mr. Bennett, who is the author of the ordinance? Okay, then. Any comments or questions from the audience? Very good. I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor,
Mr. Heitman.
I move to approve Resolution 2019-05-07-50, authorizing the second and final reading of the ordinance 1016, Amendment Number 24, for fireworks ordinance revisions to become effective on the date of publication in the township's official newspaper, which is May 9th, 2019.
Motion's been made by Trustee Heitman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, it was a close call, Trustee Kermy? All right. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Treasurer Clinton,
Yes.
Trustee Kermy,
Yes.
Trustee Dempsey,
Yes.
Trustee Dorchevitz.
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey.
Yes.
Trustee Heitman,
Yes.
Clerk Borba, yes, motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much.
Kurt, I have a request that we publicize this in the newsletter and the e-news so that people are not confused.
We've already been publicizing it today in the e-news. We took a chance, but we worded it in such a way that we said we were considering or enacting. So enacting can take longer, a period of time, but it is in the e-news tonight. We'll keep getting the word out, and the police are also aware, as well as fire, for enforcement purposes. Okay, we're moving on to item F3. This is the EMS transport policy. We have with us tonight Chief Phillips, who will be coming forward, and we also have from Plant Moran. You can state your name again. And Scott Patton, okay. So those two gentlemen will be coming forward. Before we begin, I do want to just say a few words. Again, we are not going to vote on anything here tonight, but I do want to mention that since taking office in November of 2016, we've kept our promise to rebuild the fire department after years of deliberate neglect. We have reopened Fire Station 2, improved firefighters' equipment. Our voters have overwhelmingly approved a public safety millage. We are funding OPEB and firefighter pensions, and we've achieved full staffing. We've purchased 2 new fire engines and a new ambulance to replace old, outdated vehicles. Our voters made it clear in 2016 and 2018 that they want top-notch, modern public safety that's affordable and sustainable. This improves our quality of life, our property values, and is the essential function of local government. Tonight is the next step in the modernization of our fire department. I have placed before you a proposal for Plymouth Township to do all EMS transport within a designated area and to execute a formal agreement for out-of-area transport service with Huron Valley Ambulance. I believe in consultation with Chief Phillips and Plant Moran that patients using our existing firefighter staff and our existing fleet of ambulances. Virtually all of our neighboring communities do their own transport, and it is time for us to follow suit. Whether we like it or not, our residents are going to get hurt. They're going to get into accidents. They're going to get sick. They're going to get injured. And they're going to call 911 for assistance. And whether we like to admit it or not, almost every run has money attached to it. That's why Huron Valley Ambulance is in Plymouth Township. They're here to make money. They get paid for every run from our residents who need their help. Based on our analysis, EMS runs equal roughly $600,000 a year in reimbursements from insurance. That is how the world works, and none of us can change that. We can, however, determine where those funds go. The question is straightforward. Do we want that money to go to a private company to whom we don't even have a contract, or do we want those funds reinvested in our township to benefit our community and our taxpayers? This is not an indictment of Huron Valley Ambulance. By all accounts, they provide a reputable service. But now that we have full staffing in our fire department and the needed ambulances, it is time for us to close the circle and start doing what virtually all of our other neighbors do, our own transport for our own residents. None of this works. None of this works if we need to hire more firefighters or buy additional equipment. My mandate to the chief and our firefighters is to study this proposal and make it work with our own staff. This is not mission creep. It's not empire building. It's not any of the other conspiracy theories that are being bandied about tonight by the same people who fought our public safety millage last November. As I mentioned before, we will not be voting on anything tonight, so you do have time to digest this information, ask questions, but soon, I think it is time to decide. It's been a couple years, and I hope that we can come to a good decision that will benefit all the people of Plymouth Township. With that being said, I give you Chief Phillips.
Good evening, everybody, and I guess after that, I mean, what do I need to say? We presented to the board a bunch of information. It begins with an analysis created by Plant Moran on the numbers provided by me to Plant Moran on the past year of fire transports, or I should say emergency transports. Mrs. Weidell's first question was, what does patient transport entail? And I think that's an important question to answer. This is for emergency 911 calls. We are not here to talk about transferring patients from hospital to hospital, from taking patients from nursing homes to hospitals. That is the job of the private ambulance company. That is not a job that the Plymouth Township Fire Department wants to take over. It's not a job we're proposing to take over. What we are proposing to take over is the calls that we are going on and providing patient care for today. We are not adding additional runs. These are the runs we respond to every day. 8 to 10 runs every day we respond to with our ambulances, with our fire trucks. That's what we're talking about. Predominantly, those patients go to St. Mary's Hospital. On page 77 of the document is the document I prepared for this study session. What it shows is the following hospitals, which are all within 20 miles of roughly the center of Plymouth Township and can be reached in about 25 minutes. Why did we pick that number? Well, it's really easy. University of Michigan is about the second, that's where the second most amount of patients like to go from Plymouth Township. In 2018, our record showed 115 people went to the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan is about 20 miles away. I used 220 Sheldon Road as the middle point of the township. That's Byrd School. I figured it was roughly the center of the township. I then drew a circle around that, and any hospital inside that was appropriate to transport patients, we would include. If you look at the data from the last 5 years on this page, right? Are you at page 77 at the top?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, I did skip a page. On 77, you see this historical data. As you notice, St. Mary's Mercy Hospital right there, over the last 5 years, from 2014 to 2018, has been the area where, or the hospital that most of our residents go. Roughly 70% of our patients either don't go to the hospital at all or go to St. Mary's Hospital. Number 2 on the list in 2018 was University of Michigan Hospital. If you include Mott Hospital, that was 3 more patients, that's 118. St. Joseph Mercy had 95 patients, Providence Park in Novi had 112, Beaumont Farmington Hills had 10 patients. You see a trend. You see a trend over many years, all, going to the same hospital, same percentages. The graph below is the same 5-year period and who took them to the hospital. So as you'll see, Plymouth Township Fire Department takes about somewhere between 200 and 300 patients to the hospital every year. We have transported patients to the hospital since the late 60s. It was in 1989 that we determined to have a private ambulance company come in and take the majority of the patients. And as you can see, HVA has been taking roughly, over 1,200 patients, under 1,300 patients every year to the hospital. I think it would be a good idea for this board to be aware that this is a source of revenue that we could capture and invest back into the community.
Let's go back to the St. Mary's. You have told me that if I am deathly ill, you will take me to St. Mary's even if I want to go to University of Michigan. Is that true?
That we are required
You will
by the
overrule
medical, we are required to take you to the closest, most appropriate hospital. If you are of sound mind and you can sign a waiver basically that says, listen, I understand that this decision could kill me and I want to go somewhere farther, you are allowed to sign that. But with that being said, the paramedics responding do have some leeway to determine whether you are of clear mind.
Because what I'm getting at is I think the St. Mary's is somewhat engineered or self-fulfilling. I have never met anyone in Plymouth Township who said they wanted to go to St. Mary's.
Shark.
Okay, I think St. Mary's is a good hospital, and I would go to St. Mary's.
They all want to go to Beaumont.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand, because many people have been telling me about this, that's their concern also. So I wanted to flush this out if they have a choice, because people are asking if they have a choice.
Can I touch on that?
Captain, just give us your name for the record.
Oh, Captain Chris Mack with the fire department. When I started here in 1995, I think I would have agreed with you. This has changed drastically since St. Mary's has been taken over by Trinity Health, which is the same hospital as St. Joe. St. Mary is now a level 2 trauma center. St. Mary is not the hospital that it used to be. It is substantially better, and it is requested quite frequently.
Same with Botsford. Just opened a brand new state-of-the-art emergency center.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But St. Mary is definitely, like I said, I would have agreed with you earlier on in my career, but at this point, no, St. Mary is requested quite frequently.
So what about the freestanding ECs that are?
Are you referring to like Beaumont Canton or Oakwood Canton?
And then Beaumont's building Livonia and 275 and 7 Mile.
So Beaumont Canton, I call it Oakwood Canton just out of habit.
Yeah.
Oakwood Canton is an ER. You cannot admit people to Oakwood Canton.
Right.
So if the patient needs to be admitted overnight,
Be transported back.
we can't take them there. We can take anybody there who does not need to be admitted. Well, that starts getting into a gray area of who can be admitted and who can't, right? So that gets a little difficult taking people there.
But for instance, obviously a broken foot could go there. We take, what was the number, about 10 patients a year at Oakwood Canton right now? So we can go to some of those facilities. And the facilities we can go to, I gave you a list.
You did.
It is on page. It's a list that gives all the capabilities of the hospitals.
Yeah.
And
I saw it. I don't remember where it is.
I will tell you the page. That is starting on page 93. And you'll see that, and it's actually not called Oakwood Canton anymore. It's now called, Beaumont Healthcare Center Canton, yes, absolutely. That is an area, that is a hospital we can take patients to, but again, like Captain Mack said, if they have to be admitted, we cannot take them there. Does that answer your question, Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
I know it was kind of long. Okay. So getting back, I don't know if you want to get into more of the policy or if we want to get the gentleman from Plant.
Let's stick with where you were and continue on with the sort of the big picture. And get closer to the mic, too. I'm not sure we're picking you up.
All right. So obviously, if you go back to page 75, 75 is a description and the function of the project. Basically, I followed Trustee Kermy's format. I made it a little bit longer. I hope you don't mind, as to answer all the questions that he said he'd like to have answered. And as you see, it says in 1989 we entered an agreement with HVA. It was a handshake agreement. I've never found a contract to provide EMS transport for Plymouth Township. Prior to that, the fire department provided all transport. This allowed HVA to collect transport revenue and insurance and copays at a rate that was set by HVA and is still set by HVA today. According to the analysis conducted by Plant Moran, Plymouth Township would have received an additional $496,000 in revenue in 2018 over and above the $117,068 that we actually collected.
Is that after write-offs? Has he analyzed the write-offs?
Yes. This project takes into account adjustments made for Medicare, Medicaid, and write-offs and no pays and bad addresses. This takes all of those into account.
What percentage do we use for those kinds of things? Because right now, those numbers are high.
In other words, we're not collecting very well right now, is what
Right.
you're saying.
And who will collect, in your proposal, who would collect the $490,000?
As of right now, we have a contract with MHR Billing to do our medical transports. They have been our billing agency since we left AccuMed in the early 2000s, and they would continue to collect those. Merchants in Medical is then, if you remember in the reports that I give each month, there's a line that says write-off. That write-off line is the money that goes from MHR Billing to Merchants in Medical. I have asked MHR to rename that to transfer to Merchants in Medical.
You mean that's the collection agency?
That is the collection agency, yes, sir.
So what percent do they charge us for collection, not for bad debt, for doing the processing?
Merchants in Medical?
No,
MHR Billing.
yes.
They charge us right now $19 per billable run.
So I'm not in favor of this. It's going to take a lot to convince me, and here's the reason why. As I've read through this, and all the arguments that I've heard are all about money and revenue, and I haven't heard any arguments about how this would make our community safer.
You mean operation?
Operationally, how this would make our community safer. In fact, I believe it would make us less safe, and here's the reason why. We talk about going into a contract with HVA or whomever, private ambulance service, but it's a business, and if they're just going to pick up the crumbs, the things left behind, they're not going to have a permanence in our community. It wouldn't make business sense for them to do that. And I have not heard I haven't heard anything yet, and I haven't read anything in these materials that would say that this plan would make our community safer.
What happened to our plan to look at different choices other than HVA?
We interviewed the two firms. One was HVA and the other one was affiliated with Beaumont. The resolution, the draft resolution before you tonight would effectively resolve that issue by awarding the contract to HVA. Should they choose not to accept that contract, I would recommend that we use Beaumont as a alternative, since they did bid on it. If Beaumont were to back out, there are other ambulance providers out there. I mean, there is a business to be made in that, in transport.
So the interview was the only process that basically eliminated Beaumont from, I mean, Beaumont said they'd be happy to give us money back if they transported, they would give us money back.
But apparently
We
it's
asked
not
HVA
legal beyond $40 a run or something?
We asked HVA, and HVA said no, but Beaumont
Excuse
said-
me, Trustee Heitman, just to clarify, in part of Beaumont's proposal was they would give us money back if they took our firefighters to the hospital with them for only those runs. It wasn't for all transports. I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, so before we reach conclusions here tonight, Chief, why don't we continue on with your presentation?
All right. Trustee Dorshevitz talked about improvements to the community. Right now, how we respond, and you'll see that in the last page of the Plant Moran analysis, is the call comes into the 911 center, the fire department responds, and HVA responds. That is currently how this operates and has operated since the late 80s.
Excuse me, let me stop you right there. Right now, we have a deal with the city of Plymouth for that same thing happening.
I mean, we're dispatcher. We're the
dispatch?
dispatcher for the city of Plymouth.
Yes, we dispatch for the city of Plymouth, yes.
Would that change as part of what you just said?
No.
What would happen to that
My
relationship?
proposal has nothing to do with the city of Plymouth. My proposal has to do with the residents in the Plymouth
We would
Township.
continue, Gary, we would continue to dispatch for the city of Plymouth as we currently do. If you call from the city of Plymouth with an emergency, you will be routed to HVA, which is exactly what happens now.
Okay.
That would not change.
Yeah, that would be for the city of Plymouth to make a decision, not us, obviously.
How so?
Well, how so, Chief?
We're combined.
Well, the fire chief and I mean, we discussed a lot of different scenarios, but if we're going to do medical dispatching, it would make more sense for us not to transfer any of the calls. But those are some of the things that we still have to work out.
Well, that's going to be more of a procedural protocol issue within dispatch, which would also be worked out with the city. I mean, my point is that the level of service that we provide to the city, the way they want it provided, does not change.
But you will need to purchase software, correct? To do the medical dispatching and spend money on training.
That is correct,
At
yes.
once, okay, that's not in here at all. I didn't see it.
Well, we would be
It's
doing,
about $30,000. What we budgeted a couple of times in years past and cut it out.
yeah, because we couldn't afford it.
But
And
that's not talked about in here, or I missed it.
No, I have
It's
not
not,
talked about
because
that
it's-
in here because it is not a full requirement of us taking all patients to the hospital.
and it's,
I mean, we
It's
would.
a good service, and I have advocated it for 5 straight years, but it's been rejected for 5 straight years.
yeah.
But part of the reason we rejected it was because we transferred calls to HVA, who has that software and that training. Well, I forgot what the training is called.
EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch.
All right, we don't have that. Our people aren't trained in that yet in the dispatch, right?
Some are, some are not. It's not.
It's willy-nilly.
That is correct, yes.
Because some people might have transferred from somewhere else and they already knew it or whatever.
Some have already had it. We have sent 2 recently to get it.
But we have discussed doing that for a couple of years now, regardless of who's providing the transport service. Because it does enhance public safety.
But my point is, with HVA having that software and that training, they have a higher level of ability in the dispatch versus us today.
Again, I'll rehash this issue too, but this has been one of the main problems, one of the main deficiencies here in Plymouth Township. And it is a big deficiency. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, this is bad for the citizens of Plymouth Township. The most egregious case is an 11-year-old who had a cardiac event. This 11-year-old died. They called 911, their parents. The fire department responded. We resuscitated the child. The parents, in their grief, in the emergency, did not listen to the dispatcher properly when the call was transferred to HVA. They hung up. This has been an occurrence that keeps happening.
This is the one on Trailwood.
Correct.
But he didn't die. He's alive today.
The fire department went there and resuscitated him. Yes, that's what I said.
All right.
Yeah, you are correct. But when the 911 call came in, he was dead. His heart had stopped. He was resuscitated, though, by the fire department. HVA, when we finally called them back and said, where are they coming from? They're like, we didn't get the call. So this is an inherent failure in our system. Like I say, this is the most egregious, but it happens often.
But that's a process that could be corrected.
Yeah, that's
This is a process that we have not been able to correct with 5 years of me yelling and banging my fist about it.
But we can correct it.
I
without
do
doing
not
transfer.
believe we can,
Why not?
because we haven't been able to fix it for 5 years. I have been over there. I have talked about it. I have demanded that it be corrected.
You mean with
and
the-
it
with-
still is not.
Where's the
You mean
problem?
with-
In
You
our
mean with modern
dispatch or-
technology, you can't change, you can't correct this? I don't believe that.
Well, I can tell you that for 5 solid years, I've been trying to fix this issue, and
So walk us, if you would please, walk us through what happens now. So at any given time, when we're at full staff, there are 3 fire stations, and those fire stations are staffed with how many people?
2 people at each.
2 people each. So a call comes in, and it's dispatched from Fire Station 3. And it's a medical. So you have to make a determination at that point whether you're sending an ambulance or a fire truck based on the nature of the call.
Yeah, on a medical, we would always send an ambulance.
But if it's more complex, you could have both. You could have a fire with injuries.
That's true. And all of our fire engines are, well, not all of them. Let me step back from that. The fire engine, the Fire Station 1 is a paramedic fire engine. All of our personnel, 100% of our personnel are paramedics. The engine at Station 3 will be a paramedic engine soon as well.
So currently what will happen, and we all see it happen all the time, is that there'll be, if it's, I believe if there's imminent danger, then there'll be a dispatch of both a Plymouth Township ambulance as well as HVA. So you could have 2 arrive on the scene at the same time.
Today, that's how every run happens, no matter the level of danger.
Okay, so every run to go out there. So now, in this scenario, every run would only have 1. So now that
Well, can I stop you and correct just a few things? In all calls right now, we would dispatch 1 ambulance. Our firefighters would arrive and begin care. If we determined at the time of call that it was an immediately life-threatening one, we would also dispatch an engine from a second station. So we would always be sending 4 for any immediately life-threatening situation. We would get there, we would stabilize the patient, and then what we would do is wait for HVA to transport the patient to the hospital.
Right, but again, I mean, there's a big if-come on this, and the if-come is that you're assuming that the private ambulance, I don't know, maybe the private ambulance service, whether it's HVA or one of the others, would be willing to go into a contract and commit to having an ambulance in the community on an opportunistic basis, knowing that their revenue stream is going to be pretty nominal over the course of the year. It's possible. We haven't had that discussion. But in that scenario now you have 2 fire stations that are unmanned.
But that scenario you just gave is exactly the scenario that's going on right now. HVA is only here opportunistically, meaning they don't have any contract. They don't have an agreement to keep an ambulance here.
I know.
And they don't. I mean, quite frankly, their ambulances are in Van Buren and South Lyon. And, they have an agreement with the city of Plymouth. And again, I don't want to get into their contract, and I don't want to say anything bad about them. They're a very reputable company. I've worked well with them for a number of years. But I don't even believe that their agreement with the city requires an ambulance in the city at all times. I will let them speak to that if they wish.
So, but if they had a contract, it could be. So let me finish my thought. So now you have a dispatch from Fire Station 3, and there's nobody there. Now you would have a second dispatch from another fire station, and there would be nobody there. So now you're down to one staffed fire station during that event, and
That's correct.
you'd have to rely, if there's this next person, if there's another incident concurrent, you'd have to rely on mutual aid at that point.
Another immediately life-threatening
Yeah,
is what you're saying. And yes, you're
the
correct.
second heart attack.
And that's exactly what happens today as well.
Pass it down.
That's not what
And
you're
it's some-
proposing.
For each of
This, you're proposing in your 2019 protocol, or I want to call it that.
The
On page-
operating
Yeah,
procedure.
on page 9110, says when all FD resources are committed to other incidents and mutual aid is not available, the shift commander will make the decision to contact HVA. So HVA is going to be third.
Yeah.
Where's that at, Jerry? What's that?
Page 90 on
Yeah.
the second,
Under mutual
on the
aid.
second paragraph.
Okay.
You talk about mutual aid. So if you end up with, so if everybody is busy, you're going to call mutual aid, not HVA. And then if you don't have mutual aid, then you're going to call HVA.
The surrounding communities have requested over the years and demanded of us that if we call them for mutual aid, they do not want HVA there. They don't
So-
want to be running, with HVA. And
But-
that's
but-
not
but-
our decision.
But, so really what you're saying is HVA is going to be doing no runs.
Yeah,
That's the way I read that.
yeah, I did too.
It goes from doing about 85% of the runs to zero, because I don't know who's going to sign a contract like that. And then what's wrong with HVA? Why do you want to make them third? Why wouldn't you make them second?
Well, because historically speaking, and the data suggests that HVA is coming from farther and farther away. I know when I call 911 and say, I need help from Canton to go to Briarwood, Canton has an ambulance closer because it's at the Canton Fire Station. When I have a run up in the north side, I know where Northville Township's ambulances are because they keep them at the fire station, just like I know where Livonia's are at all times.
But if we got
If
it,
HVA would give me the location of their ambulances, we could make a better decision.
But
And
we
then,
could make a contract like
it's
that.
part,
couldn't
yeah,
we?
because
and I would have no problem with that if we knew where the closest ambulance was. If the closest HVA ambulance was sitting right here on the corner, I'd love to be able to send them to that.
Because, exactly to that point, I mean, it becomes part of the contract with the private ambulance, HVA or whomever, that they have an ambulance in the community, and when that ambulance leaves the community, they're responsible for backfilling, bringing
have a
another.
time limit. That you gotta answer any
Something, or
calls
they have a
within
back.
6 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever that is. You can make the contract say anything you want.
Yeah, because, again.
What happens if they don't show up?
They violate the contract.
Well,
Yeah,
then they
but
got
what
liability.
happens to our citizens? I'm sorry, that guy doesn't care that somebody just violated it. He's
Yeah,
laying,
we have a backup.
What do
We
you mean
have,
they don't care?
we have another station.
the guy's laying there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, though, according to his protocol here, he has to call Canton or Livonia or Westland. So that could be just, so the same scenario could happen.
So if you had a contract, because again, to go back to I don't want this to be about money. We just raised a millage, and, it shouldn't be because we're trying to get more revenue. We should be adopting a model which is going to bring the maximum amount of safety to our community. And to me, because HVA has been opportunistic, there's never been a contract, they generate revenue off of it. I'd like to hear from them, but you could structure a contract that says, look, you're required to have a backfill so that there's always that ambulance in the community. I mean, you can write a contract any way you want, right?
Before you go, I want to understand this a little bit better, because I got the impression when you were talking about transports that HVA is not providing any medical assistance. That if you deem there was a medical issue, you would dispatch from one and then from another station, and then HVA would come in strictly for the transport. But, I mean, is that true, or are they really providing medical assistance? to
They are
the
providing
citizens?
medical assistance. I don't want to convolute that at all.
Okay.
The problem that we have is the way that I understand HVA's dispatch to work, and I'm sure they'll discuss this if they choose to come up here. When a rig is stationed currently in Belleville, as soon as they tell that Belleville rig to move to Plymouth, their dispatcher moves it to Plymouth. They then say, your rig is now coming from Plymouth. However, in that 30 seconds that they told them to move to Plymouth from Belleville, that rig just put it in drive. So they're saying that your rig is now coming from Plymouth, and it's really truly coming from Belleville. Are you following me on that?
Yeah.
That's one of the problems that we've run into. Numerous times, it happens daily, that dispatch will get on the radio and say, your HVA rig's coming from Belleville in 94. Your HVA rig is coming from South Lyon, Wixom. These areas aren't close. It takes a long time to get here from there.
So that's why Plymouth Township Fire Department transports in those cases if they can't wait.
Yes.
That's always been the case, and that's
Yes.
why 15 to 20% are transported by Plymouth Township.
That's correct.
And by the way, prior to 1989, we had a different private company, and before that, we had the funeral home that did it. That was the ambulance.
At one time, Plymouth Township did do its own transports.
Right, but not for long.
Well, I
don't want a
can't,
hearse showing up.
One-stop shopping. I guess.
I can't discuss on, how long that actually occurred.
So just to continue my line of thought process, today, the dispatching procedure is 911 call comes in, they contact you, and then they transfer the call to HVA, and then HVA, at that point, our dispatcher, if I'm correct, hangs up. HVA then stays on the line getting all of the medical information. So really at that point, HVA is more informed as to what the medical emergency is than we are.
Yes, that is the
Unless we
problem.
are already on site.
Unless we're already on site. But then,
Typically, the transfer of the phone call happens much quicker. Typically, within 1 minute to 2 minutes, that happens. So I'll give you an example, and I'm sure the captain can give you a number of examples. We got called to a medical at an apartment complex at Sheldon and North Territorial. Plymouth Township firefighters got on scene prior to HVA, and the HVA dispatchers were notified that the patient had a gun. So I walked into the scene, and here's a guy standing with a gun. Plymouth Township was never told about this. This put our firefighters in jeopardy. This put me in jeopardy. I'll be honest with you. It was not a good scene. We had a police officer show up a few minutes later going, "What are you doing here? There's a gun." Well, nobody ever told us because our dispatch was no longer in communication with the patient. That was all being happened in Washtenaw County. And that information does
technology
not get
that can be
transferred back.
changed.
But
And
these,
it hasn't for years.
these examples you're giving to me are, they're critical of the performance of the private ambulance company. They're not addressing the concept. And the concept is, if you have a private ambulance company and they're professional caregivers and they have a contractual and then a potential liability issue to have a permanence in the community, and you've worked out all the operational details, I would argue that's much safer.
But in
Because you got
reality and
more
in
people.
practice, what happens is Plymouth Township firefighters arrive on scene. They begin patient care. A lot of times that patient care, good patient care, is putting them on a cot and taking them to the hospital. That's the appropriate thing to do. But we have been directed by previous boards that we're to wait for HVA to do the transport. So as good soldiers, that's what we do. And we end up waiting on scene, and which is not good for the patient. This is now the time when the medical necessity, like the things that we have to do to make sure that the patient stays alive, keeps breathing, is done. It's time to go to the hospital.
Well, I thought we did that. That's why you have the 15 to 20% transports.
We do
So you
that.
don't wait around.
We do that in a lot of cases. But let me ask you, when is the right time to go? All right, I'm doing my work. Everything's good. All right, HVA should be here any minute now. Dispatch
You're
just
supposed
told
to make
me
that
they're
decision.
here. Huh?
Isn't the person on site supposed to make that decision?
Correct. And they are making that decision. But now it's HVA is here. All right, great. HVA is here. They're going to be bringing their cot in right now, and we're going to load you up. Well, they're not here. Dispatch, I thought you said HVA. That's what they called. They told us they were there. Oh, they got lost. They're not there. So now we're waiting around again. I can have my firefighters come up here and tell you how often they are waiting around for HVA. Again, HVA is not doing a bad job. They have ambulances all over. They're coming. They're paramedics.
Well, it sounds like we got an operational
Yeah.
management issue and
That's what it sounds
decision-making issue. On-site decision-making.
Listen,
Maybe
if
we
you
need
want
some
the
training.
on-site decision to be when it's time to go, then we're probably just going to, no matter what contract you write, we'll probably be taking 50 to 60% of all patients.
Chief, let's not
surprised they
get,
don't do that
we seem to be on the edge of a rabbit hole right now, so why don't you, let's stay back on track to your presentation.
There was, if I can just address the board real quickly, there was one question of how does this make this better for the patient? I'm sorry, I don't know who asked that question. Okay. Mr. Dorshevitz, I'm just going to use you for an example since you asked the question.
Go for it.
Okay.
Because someday I'm going to need an ambulance.
that's
Hopefully not sooner than later.
So one of the things that we do when we first arrive on scene is we start doing patient care. We start doing a diagnosis of the patient, right? We start doing blood pressure. We do heart rhythm. We check your blood glucose level, your oxygen level in your blood, all these things, right? This has helped making a diagnosis on what is wrong with you. When HVA walks in, they do all the exact same work that we just did to you. How many times do you want your finger poked when you get your blood sugar taken? I just want once because it kind of hurts.
So HVA does have trained paramedics in every
Absolutely.
single ambulance that comes.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
HVA has trained paramedics that respond in Plymouth Township majority of the time. The other day, we had 2 basic EMTs respond to a run. If they did not have a name tag that said basic EMT or emergency medical technician, I would not have known, because their uniforms are exactly the same as a paramedic, I would not have known that they were not paramedics, and it's potential that I could have turned my patient over to people that were not as highly trained.
Again, that could be contractual.
There's contractual, and this is my opinion. I'm just going to give you my opinion on this. There's legality in the office, and then there's actual practice out in the field.
That's all contractual.
Today, there's no contract.
We have a verbal agreement with them right now that they bring 2 paramedics to the scene, and they didn't do that.
We don't have a contract.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to get it. That's
Let it go.
But what about what about the concern? So now you're out of the community, right? So let's say you go to U of M. I don't know, what is it? At least an hour, right? You're out of the community.
Chief, you have those numbers more than I do. I don't.
The data on the Google Maps says it's a 25-minute drive, but
Yeah.
you are correct, probably with the drive time.
Easily. Yeah.
The transfer to the hospital staff, yes.
How long typically, I mean, you don't just, dump and run, right? You have to transfer.
Chief, we need
them.
you closer to the mic.
I'm sorry, yeah. No, you are correct. It is probably about an hour when you involve the transfer of the patient into the hospital, the care transfer over to the nursing staff. It's about an hour.
Okay, so you're out of
Hour
the
plus transportation?
No, probably an hour total.
It's got to be, okay, if you went to Ann Arbor, it would be more.
From when you're leaving the scene to Ann Arbor, transferring the patient and back. According to Google Maps, they say it's I believe that.
Right, it's an hour driving. but you have to do some work once you're in the emergency room.
It just seems to me you could address your operational issues. If a prior board instructed you to do something, well, they're not here anymore. You could address your operational issues and still have a hybrid model that would bring safety to the community, additional safety. It seems to me. I mean, I get it. If you're sometimes, I mean, these are just observations. I don't have any data, but sometimes I see an HVA ambulance on site before from a township. We all do.
Yeah.
We all see that. So they might be doing the diagnostics and that sort of stuff.
Occasion, yes.
So
Yes,
maybe
sometimes they do need us there.
operationally,
Absolutely.
I get what you're saying. Let me take your blood pressure. Well, that guy just took it. Why do you need to take it? I get that, but it seems to kind of be blurring. Seems to me that you've had some challenges operationally with the private ambulance service, and that the answer
Again,
is we
you
do all
say
the
that these are
transports.
just operational problems, but they're operational problems been going on for 20-some years that we can't correct. That, when a patient in their emergency tells something to my paramedics and we tell it to additional paramedics that then go to the hospital, it's that game where I tell you something, you tell something to Gary, Gary tells something to Jerry, and when he tells it to Kurt, it's different. And this is what we're seeing in the field, is the patient may tell us something, but that information does not make it to the hospital. It's called continuity of care. And the reason why it's so important is when I start treating a patient, that patient that I'm treating, now that care goes from me to the hospital, not from me to another paramedic to, listen, I can tell you, and we've had scenes where I've transferred it to an HVA crew who has transferred it to another HVA crew because the first crew is getting off shift and they didn't want to pay overtime, so they had another one. This was a long time ago. I don't know if it happens anymore. This was a number of years ago. I have been out in the field for 5 years, so I don't know if it's happened in the last 5 years, but it's again a problem, and it's a problem I want to address. I want to do what's best for my patient. What's best for my patient is this continuity of care, is me taking my resident, my patient, caring for them all the way to the hospital. I think this is the best model. A lot of other fire departments think it's the best model. That's why they're going to it. Yes, there's money involved, $500,000. That's a value to the community. That's a value to the community in which you as a community member do not have to invest as much in. Now, the nice thing about this money is it's, and this is, I am going to get off onto this tangent, this is unrestricted funds. This is the community's money to use as the community sees fit. And I think that's an important distinction because in these days, I mean, you guys hear the same speeches from Plant Moran all the time. Well, this is restricted funds. You can only use it for this. This is restricted funds. You can only use it for this. I don't know if you want to address this at all, but I think this is an important piece. The chief important component.
Go ahead. Can we go back to, I'm still trying to understand the dispatch process. And I know we're getting procedural and operational and stuff. But I think if I understand it correctly, today we transfer the call to HVA and we hang up, which means that dispatcher is now free to take the next 911 call. What happens if HVA is not our backup? Does that dispatch agent have to stay on the line?
In some cases, they would. Most cases, probably the vast majority, 90% of the time, they're going to get the information. They're going to say the fire department's on the way. They're hanging up. But there are times when, listen, I need you to calm down. I need you to, I'm sorry, I will speak in the mic. I'm trying to talk to you guys. Where they're going to have to coach them. Now, this is another important thing about continuity of care, in that when the 911 dispatcher answers the call, they begin a repertoire with that patient. They start to build a level of trust. That level of trust gets more information. That more information tells us more that they can then relay to the firefighters, to the paramedics, to whoever's responding. When the transfer happens, and I've seen it, and I've listened to these tapes every single day, that stops. Dead. And it starts all over again.
Yep.
Hello, can I help you? Calm down, sir. What's the problem? I just told the last person, my son is not breathing. Okay, where are you? I just told the last person. Why do I have to tell you again? And so on and so forth. And this is the model that we have been using here for 20,
That's
since
a
89.
process that could be corrected with technology.
But if you recall, when HVA was here during that, what month was that meeting?
August?
We specifically mentioned that, and the gentleman from Beaumont said, yes, I think we can solve that. We work great with fire departments. As a matter of fact, we work good with fire departments wanting to transport. We can solve that issue.
And they said they would work with us to solve that issue.
Yes, they did. The other agency was not so interested. And I've asked this question many times. I mean,
Okay, so let's get back on
With a
track.
contract, they
Oh, come on, Jerry. We know contracts. Contracts are not going to change technology, okay? All right. Continue, Chief, with your presentation.
okay. Yeah, so I'm going to jump back here. So I talked a little bit about, Mrs. Wydell asked about maintenance of the vehicle. So if we could turn to page 76, and I am jumping around here, and that's fine.
Which
If you guys
page?
have questions.
76.
Well, we've got a lot of pages in front of us, and I've only seen 3 so far, so.
Yeah. On page 76, we talk about the increased wear and tear on our vehicles. Okay, so you'll see on here, you'll see a graph. We have 2 2015 Ford F-550 ambulances. Right now, one of them has 32,000 miles. When I did this, it has more today. They drive every day. The other has 38,000 miles. They average about 8,000 to 9,000 miles a year right now. They respond to everything. We've averaged, based on all of our runs, a 6-mile average. Now, clearly, it takes a lot longer to drive to U of M than it does St. Mary's. But if you look at the total volume, 1,100 transports to St. Mary's versus a couple hundred to U of M, the average is about 6 miles. That's not a round trip, so I doubled that. I estimate we're going to put an additional 6,000 miles on each rig per year. And I think the yearly estimated cost for that is going to be about $2,500 with gas. What I did is I broke down how many mileage we put on the vehicle and how much did it cost. You'll see that I put down a cost per mile, and I did an estimate, and then I rounded them. Because
Why is it so different between both? They're the same model.
Why is it? Because
36 cents and the other is 92 cents.
Because Station 3s, we ended up putting new brakes on it in December that was inside of here, but we haven't done it yet with Rescue 1, which we will do next if we haven't just already done that. So it wasn't.
And it tripled the cost per mile to put new brakes on?
Yeah, brakes were expensive, and new tires too. We put brakes and new tires on it in this window of 1 year that I looked at.
So that's not a reliable number. It just doesn't make sense. Most vehicles, you doing scheduled, or it's not scheduled maintenance, it's unscheduled maintenance, having that order of magnitude 3 times. But anyway, and then you're going to have wear and tear because you're driving more miles.
That's correct.
You haven't calculated the wear and tear in here.
Right, and if you look at my wear and tear, is the $2,500 is basically the middle ground between these two numbers. Because again, we put more cost into Rescue 3 than Rescue 1 in the window of time I looked in, which was a 12-month window.
But we were going to have 3 units.
Yeah, if you look down, we have a 2003 International on there. That vehicle.
But we're getting another new one.
In May, this month or next month?
At the end of this month, the 2003 will be replaced with the new one.
With a
yes.
new one. And what is that costing us a month?
The new one?
We paid cash for that?
The 203,000 was the purchase price, yes. Yeah. The 2003 International, if you really want to, that cost us like $25,000 to keep on the road, which is why it was an unreliable number for here.
We're buying a new ambulance regardless of what happens with HVA.
Yes.
No, I know that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just saying there's really 3 to carry the load.
I think he's making that clear.
Yeah, and I'm saying, I show 3 up here, but the third one, we're getting rid of. And well, it's sitting right there, as a matter of fact. That ambulance has just cost so much to maintain. It's a completely different style, model. It's too much to maintain. So
Okay.
I felt that the numbers wouldn't be helpful or germane to this conversation.
So continue.
So it's going to be that much for all 3 ambulances that we have? Let's forget about the 2003. We're getting another new ambulance.
Yep.
So you're going to estimate that it's going to cost that much for 3 ambulances, not 2,
$2,500 an ambulance.
times 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that's only fuel,
No, that's fuel and maintenance costs.
fuel and maintenance, okay?
And oil changes, wear and tear. That is all the costs that we put into those ambulances over that 12-month period. I looked at the last 12 months to predict the next 12 months.
Do you, in your opinion, is that the only incremental cost that we would have if we did full-time transport? Would there be other costs? Would we need more dispatchers? Would we need more overtime? Would we need any other costs associated with it?
I don't believe we'd need any more overtime in the fire department. Now, I don't want to speak for the police department. It's not my department. But what I can tell you is looking at other departments, how they operate, Northville Township runs more fire and EMS runs than Plymouth Township does, and they do it with less dispatchers. And they provide EMD services. I think we can be just as efficient. Now, I don't want to speak for the police chief. I'll let him speak for himself. But that's what I looked at when I did my analysis.
What happens if we need more costs? You have to add let's say you have to add $100,000 in overtime, which in the past, that's been the big resistance, was to cover the stations. You have to call back under labor contract 2 people for a minimum of 4 hours from home.
Are there callbacks under the contract?
Let the chief answer
So
the question.
that used to be one of the big objections.
You are correct. That was a long time ago, back in the early 90s through the 90s. And Kathleen Keene McCarthy, when she was supervisor, I don't remember if anybody remembers what years
Yeah, I
those
do.
were. That stopped when she was supervisor, if you recall. She put an end to that, so we didn't.
But it was widely talked about even before the breakup with the city of Plymouth. They used to use that reason.
I know. For
And that
some
was
reason,
2010, 2011.
for some reason, people have said that we call in people to sit and man a station with no ambulances and no fire trucks in it. People keep saying that, but that's not what happens. We don't do that. We call back, the only time we call back firefighters is for fires or large emergencies. When we talk with the Plant Moran gentleman, he's going to talk about the 10 times last year that we had more than 3 concurrent runs.
So if the station is
Those
empty,
are the times we're going to call people.
so you'll leave the station empty unless you have a concurrent run.
Unless we have multiple concurrent runs. That is correct. Yes, sir. And that's how we operate today. And that is how we have operated for the last decade. Decade, right? Yeah.
And how often does that happen? Don't you have stats that back that up? Is
Yes.
that
Oh,
3
no, absolutely.
times?
The Plant Moran study is going to say 10 times. I would say we call back on every structure fire, which is about 20 times a year.
But will happen much more. We don't really have experience with that because we're not transporting, Kurt. So we really don't know how often the station will be empty because we've never transported 100%.
But again, an empty station with no fire trucks and no ambulance in it, why would you staff it? I guess would be my question. What are you going to have them do? Run down the street? I mean, I'm not trying to be coy, but an empty station with no equipment in it, there's no reason to staff it.
But you might have a fire engine in that station.
Yes.
All right, so that'd be a reason to staff it.
But in the times when we do callback, and for the last decade when we do callback, guys are coming in, they're taking that equipment and they're taking it out to the fire or to the emergencies that are going on.
So you mentioned here that it was only 10 times where there was more than 3, but there's a total of 45 where there was 3 or more. So when you have 3 at the same time, that means all 3 stations could be empty.
Nobody
45 times.
That
Nobody to put a
45
fire
times,
out.
So that would be 45 times, not 10 times.
Where are you saying?
Let's turn to the page. What page are you?
Page
in the deck.
71. Surely there are just,
Surely.
let's see, 1, 2, there's more than 10. There's, let's see, 7, there's 11 that are more than 3, but there's 45
34.
that are 3 and more.
Yeah.
So if you have 3 at the same time, all 3 stations are empty.
Yes, and this
That's
data,
45 times, not 10 times.
So you're adding 34
10
plus
times,
4
uh,
plus
the-
3 plus 1 plus 3?
So there's 45 times
where
when,
there's 3 or more. You are correct. There's 45 times when there's 3 or more.
yeah, not 10.
No, there was 10 times when there was more than
Yeah, but
3.
what
I'm
saying,
sorry.
though, is the real number is 45 because you'd have all 3 stations empty. That's what we should be talking about.
Okay. There
I
is
guess
some-
under that, and I'm trying to understand those scenarios too. So let's pretend for argument's sake, there is one team that's currently en route to St. Mary's. That fire station is now empty. And boom, you get a call and somebody's had a heart attack. Now,
I'm sorry, I lost the last sentence of that.
no worries. So somebody's en route to St. Mary's. Now a call comes in, heart attack. You would dispatch 2 units there. So now you, in essence, you really have only 2 concurrent activities, but you're empty in all your stations.
Yes, that's true. That's absolutely true. But not all of those units are going to go to the hospital. 2 units are going to go back up and make sure that everything is stable, and then they're going to clear. They will back up in a fire engine, and they will be available to respond to the next incident.
Yeah,
But yes, you are correct. There are going to be
I
times.
think we're all just trying to get a sense of what's the potential risk of having nobody to respond to an emergency.
Right.
Where we would have to call in mutual aid. Getting back to Bob's point is this making us safe?
One of the things that I think I should clarify is everything we're talking about is based on our minimum manning numbers. We actually have 4 firefighters at Fire Station 1 assigned. We go down due to vacations and sick time to 6. So we have 8 firefighters a day. That's what's been the board approved. Most of the time, the backups occur from 2 people at Station 1 and a fire engine. But yes, you're right. Christmas, I mean, there are times when we only have 6 firefighters, 2 at each station.
So all the firefighters are paramedics,
Every one of our firefighters there is a paramedic.
and they have extra compensation for that, right?
It's like
Yes, they receive
$2,000.
a ALS bonus of $2,000 and a multiplier of 1.5% based on their base salary, is it, Chief?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's in the contract that we currently have that was approved by the previous board.
If we went to, I'm trying to remember from the contract, and I did read through it again. If we went to 100% transport, doesn't that entitle the collective bargaining unit to reopen the wage provision?
There is a reopener clause that should the township consider EMS transport, that the contract would be reopened. It does not say what happens after that. Obviously, I think the intent of the parties at that time was that would be a wage reopener or some other compensation of some sort. However, that contract has expired, and that's the contract that we're currently renegotiating, a new contract. So
The effect of this meeting, if it hadn't expired, would have reopened the contract.
correct,
Really?
Yes.
No.
arguably.
Arguably.
Actually, the language specifically says, if the township transports on a full-time basis. So the meeting itself would not have been the reopener. Just point of clarification. I mean,
Lawyers could argue that, Bob and Chief, but it's the contract is really vague on what happens. It says the contract is reopened. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you shall bargain for X or Y. It doesn't say there shall be a transport bonus of some sort. So it's vague, and it could have been, frankly, it could have been litigated if necessary. We don't have to worry about that because that contract has expired as of March 31st.
But it does mean that there is a labor union component to this entire decision. it's related to.
There is a labor union component to everything that firefighters do, and that's the law of the land. So,
Mark, are you done?
Am I done?
Yeah.
does
Did I answer your
I'm done with
question
the
or no?
dispatch issue, yeah.
But I think what he's getting at is that presently you have HV8 as a form of leveraging and extending your resources so you don't get overextended in the event of multiple incidents. It's essentially a way of privatizing and outsourcing your peak demand.
Yep.
doesn't mutual aid have the same effect?
Yes, it does. We have automatic aid agreements with the city of Northville, and we have agreements with every fire department in 19 departments in the Western Wayne Mutual Aid Association, as well as an additional mutual aid agreement with Salem Township Fire.
But it's not exactly the same because
No, wait.
They have an agreement. I don't have an agreement with HVA. I got a handshake that somebody made,
Let me get
25
back on
years
my
ago.
high horse here. Right now, we're running 4 times more mutual aid given than received,
That is correct.
based on last year's numbers.
and part of that is because of Canton refuses to have HVA because of labor reasons.
Absolutely. And every one of
Northville.
our guys are going to the farthest reaches in Canton to go take care of it because Canton can't do it. All right, so now,
And their personnel won't work with HVA. Same thing
now
as
I've got
Northville
guys
Township.
definitely out of the area, right? So put your little concurrent outages and think about those numbers now.
4 times.
Yeah, I'm looking at big times that I'm going to have concurrent incidences, right? And, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this because it doesn't matter how many I transport myself, these guys aren't here. They're nowhere, they're not even in the township today, right? They're everywhere else.
But if you have
Who's
8
they?
firefighters and then you have a private ambulance, so now your staff is
There
now
you go.
10.
Yeah,
Then they're also available for fire suppression. If
Yeah.
you need them, they're not transporting.
right. Yeah.
That's what you're getting at with the question, what is the overall net quotient of safety?
Right. Yeah.
Chief, you want to continue with your program here?
Poor chief.
He's tough. He can take it.
Thank you. But I ran out of water. If you turn to page 78 in the document, I think this is an important component, to present to you guys. The current, this is a chart that shows the hospitals that we would go to, how many patients went there in 2018. But if you go down a little bit more, you see that little staffing bar. The current staff will support a trans-funding model with no additional staff. And I have some comparable communities on the last page of this document that also supports that. Plymouth Township Fire Department only employs licensed paramedics. That's an important distinction right there. We do not participate in any alternate staffing model, like most private ambulances, and some downriver fire departments do as well. PTFD ambulances, again, I'm going to state it again, are staffed with 2 licensed paramedics. Plymouth Township currently has 24, our entire staff. All PTFD paramedics are currently PEP, Pediatric Education for Pre-Hospital Professionals. I know it's a mouthful. We also have a certified instructor in PALS, Pediatric Advanced Life Support. Every one of our employees will have that. This places 8 firefighters on duty each day before vacation, personal time, and sick day. Plymouth Township maintains 6 firefighters at a minimum. Wayne County Medical Control, or otherwise known as HEMS, requires a paramedic and a specialist on an ambulance. However, it does allow an alternate staffing model, which would put an EMT and a paramedic on an ambulance.
And that's what HVA does in light of the shortage
That is
going
correct.
on.
Private ambulance, if you turn to the next page, does use alternate staffing from time to time based on their available staffing levels. This issue is caused by the shortage of paramedics nationally. And then I put down in here license levels in the state. You have a paramedic, you have a specialist, and an EMT basic. Specialists are being phased out. There's not many left. But it's important that you understand that, everybody here in Plymouth Township is a fully trained paramedic. HVA, not by their own volition, they would love to have everybody be a fully trained paramedic, but I keep hiring them from them. Can't do that at the moment. The next thing is comparable communities. Now, I did throw some communities on here like Canton Township just because they're close to us. I threw Redford Township and Farmington Hills. If you see they're in red, I don't know if the audience can see that, just to say that they're not really comparable. I mean, a city of 79,000 is not comparable to Plymouth Township. But if you look, Plymouth Township has a population of 27,000, has 16 square miles, 24 paramedics. We had 2,900 runs, 2,965, 3 stations, 3 ambulances. We do partial transporting. Canton Township, a lot bigger than us, but let's look at Garden City. 27,000 people, much smaller area. Yes, they do have a hospital in their community. They have 1 station, 2 ambulances, 21 firefighters. They did 350 more runs, roughly. Allen Park, 2 ambulances, 4,200 runs, 1,200 runs more than us. 24 firefighters, 28,000, very comparable. Northville Township, 28,000 residents, 16 square miles. They have 1 more firefighter a day than Plymouth Township. They did 3,300 runs with 2 ambulances. Our staffing levels right now in the fire department would support this. Our staffing levels would support this. If you remember when I showed you the 5-year trends, that we're not growing at super fast levels. I don't expect there to be 1,000 more runs next year. I would be amazed if there was. It would be the biggest growth we ever had. I would be amazed if we had 200 runs more. I'd be pretty amazed at 100 runs. The last 5 years, we've shown modest increase, 40 up, 20 down, 30 up, 10 down. So comparably, we compare with all these departments that transport. Now, I did include like Van Buren on here that doesn't transport. They have a different model. White Lake, very similar to us. They do partial transporting with 3 stations. Washington Township, 3 ambulances out of 2 stations, 25,000 people, 27 firefighters a day, 1 more than us.
Now, if you had another column that would say what their local tax rate is, every one of these is 2 to 5 times our local tax rate. These are rich communities.
So we're more efficient. That's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're doing what we're doing today.
So our guys can do it then.
And then in the last page of this, page 80, we show the departments that have moved from a private transporting model to fire-based transport. Taylor, 2017. Taylor was a full-time fire department that transported patients to the hospital. They got away from it. They sold their ambulances. They got completely away from it. They went back to it. They said that it was better for their citizens. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but clearly that was the decision their board made. Adrian, last year when I did my thing, Adrian Fire said, we want to do it. They're now full-time transporting. Northville Township started doing this in 2003. It's been working really well for them. Auburn Hills, 2013. Sterling Heights, 2017. Farmington Hills has been doing it since 2002. So it's a trend, and it's a trend that's growing.
Do we have what they were paying before and what their costs are now for their fire department?
No.
Chief, isn't this also a retention issue? We understand that we are all communities. There's an article today about South Lyon, how they're struggling to maintain a professional fire department as they experience growth. This is a buyer's market right now. We basically have zero unemployment in this country. We're at full employment. Police and fire jobs are not seen as attractive as they used to be. You can make $100,000 a year working for a software company now rather than making half that amount after a few years lugging hose and saving lives. What does this do for in your opinion as chief, for retention? I mean, do we have guys that don't feel like they're getting the experience that they wanted, and could that hurt us with respect to retention?
I'm going to answer that question in a couple ways. First, I'm going to take you back in the Wayback Machine to 1992. I grew up in Rochester Hills, Oakland Township, which is just north of there. Very affluent community, nice community. Got a job offer to come down to Plymouth Township. Came down here, accepted the job. I'm like, wow, they got ambulances. I get to transport. I spent all this money to get this license. I went to college. I got this license. I can now do stuff. I can take care of my patient and take him to the hospital. Rochester Hills at the time, they had a system where they didn't transport. We didn't even have ambulances. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And then I got down here and I'm like, oh, what do you mean we don't transport? We have ambulances to transport. We have a hospital that's a mile outside of our community. How do we not transport? And the next group of guys and the next group of guys, the same thing. They all came here going, what do you mean we don't transport? That's what fire departments do. We fight fires and we take sick people to the hospital. That's our job. That's why we got into this. That's the first thing. That was my first disappointment when I came here. Is I don't get to take care of my patients. I don't get to see how they're doing. I don't get to have that fulfillment that what I did mattered in their life, that I took them to the hospital and they're better.
But then why'd you stay?
Then why'd I stay? I don't know. That's a great question.
Seniority.
But we've got firefighters now. We've got firefighters who are hiring in today that have the same view of this. They want to come here and they want to help their community out. They want to do a good job for their patient. They want to know that what they're doing matters. And that's important. Now, I will answer your question as to why I stayed. Good benefits. Let's be honest. That's why I stayed. I came here and I got good benefits. And I thought this was a good place to live and work. And I stayed here through the good times and the bad. When we laid off 9 firefighters, when we closed a fire station, I stayed here. When I hit retirement age, I stayed here. So I believe in this community. And I believe this is the best thing to do for this community. Because I think this is good for the fire department. I think it's good for the community. Yes, I do think it is a better system than what we are currently doing. Why? Because I've been doing the current system for 27 years. And yes, Clerk Vorba, I keep trying to fix all these problems. But maybe I'm the only one who cares to fix them. They don't. So the young firefighters of today want to go into this to help people. And right now, they don't have the same benefits I had 27 years ago. And you know what they're going to do? They might go somewhere else. I'm not saying they are, but they might.
Nobody has the benefits they had 27 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't.
I would argue with that. There are some communities, and maybe they pay more for them, that do have the same benefits they did 27 years ago.
And as we have said in the labor negotiation process, we will never be comparable to the Northvilles and the Dearborns of this world. We seek something better than where we are, but realizing that we'll never be able to achieve what many of these other communities have, primarily because of their legal restrictions and tax rates. So, Chief, is there anything else you'd like to share with us, or bring in the Plant Moran fellow here?
I think we can just bring in the Plant Moran guy, and then I can field any questions people might have.
The Plant Moran guy.
Hi, I'm the Plant Moran guy.
All right.
Scott Patton, we're very pleased to not just be your auditor, but to help out on this particular project. So thank you very much. My scope for this particular engagement was, it was a very limited one. And there were 2 things that I was asked to look at, one of which was if you move into this different type of service delivery of doing the transports with your fire staff, what impact would that have? Are you able to do it within what the current staffing levels are and the equipment and stations that you have? So that was question number 1. Question number 2 was, if you did that, what would be a financial impact? And on the financial impact, we looked exclusively at the revenue side of it. And Chief had shared some things as far as like what the impact would be around vehicles and a couple of other variables that showed up. But so within that narrow scope, the things that we did not do, we didn't talk to HVA, we didn't talk to do interviews of your firefighters, look for quality. those sorts of things. We didn't, validate the data that we received. We looked at it. We saw some things that we brought to Chief's attention because there were some errors in the data, and so he made some modifications based on that. We didn't look at, any contracts that you have. We asked for the HVA contract, and of course we couldn't get our hands on it. But what we did do is we reviewed the data, and for as far as the financial data that we looked at, if it wasn't in BS&A, for us it didn't matter. It was whatever was actually collected by the and deposited in the township's accounts that where we took it into consideration. There are 3 different financial reports that we looked at, and the only one that mattered to us was what showed up in BS&A for last year. The other couple of reports had to do with how much it was, the various collection rates and those sorts of things. And there's a bit of a moving figure there, because if you have a run that happens in, say, December, it's not going to get collected until January. So the total dollars that were collected in 2018 were what we paid attention to. And, the 3 things couldn't quite match up, and it had to do more with the timing of when particular collections happened than anything else. They were all within the same realm of right around, what was it? I can't find it. 100 and, how many, 17,000? Yep, $117,000. So it moved a little bit, but at the end of the day, it was only the data from BS&A that we paid attention to. So with that data, we looked at what the total collections were, and then the number of runs that the township did, and extrapolated directly from that of the total dollars and the per run. When you extrapolate out and assume that the township would have that 1,217 runs in that were experienced in 2018, if the township delivered on all of those, the dollars that would be generated from that would be $496,000. Again, all other things being equal, we didn't look at the operational issues, a lot of the things that were brought up today, but that's in a nutshell what it is that we were asked to look at. On the other question, as far as the operations, can it be done, essentially was the question. And if you look at that 3rd page of our report, it's page 31 of the PDF document for the township packet. We identified a number of dates there where the number of runs for that particular day that were happening concurrently exceeded what your current deployment levels could be. So there were 10 different dates there. Of those 10 dates, there were a few of them where we identified that there were anomalies in the data.
Half.
Yeah.
Half.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay. That's a big number.
it is. It is.
Say again, you said 10, and what did you say?
Half of those 10 have anomalies.
So as an example, the September 1st one, things just didn't quite match up there. So again, we brought that to the chief's attention.
Why so many errors? That's a lot of errors.
I can address that. So,
For how many data points? 1,200 data points?
so
And you had-
first, it was one error, and what happened was the date was fat-fingered, for lack of a better term. Instead of the run clearing at 2018, the run cleared at 2108. So it showed every run for 100 years being a concurrent run. And in that particular run, and I have it in the 10-point spreadsheet, it was a dispatcher error. A run created an error when nothing happened. But it threw the data off because when they typed in the clear time, they put 2108, not 2018. When that was corrected, that cleaned that up. The other major one was on October 1st, another fat finger. He put in the date that they cleared as the 10th of October, not the 1st of October. So once we cleared those up, that cleared up all the anomalies in the data.
Do we clear up the source of putting the anomalies in?
Yes, it's been addressed.
It's a human training issue, right?
I would hope.
A human put them in wrong, right? Or did a machine put them? All right.
A human did, correct.
But we're going to make decisions based on metrics here, right? This is 100% data. You can't be fat-fingering
But
data.
we didn't know it was fat-fingered until we hired Plant Moran? Did Plant Moran figure out that the data had anomalies?
I looked at the data and identified
That's
those.
why we had it fact-checked, Gary. I mean, we want to make sure that the numbers are accurate and so that we can make informed decisions.
We also found that the software was not running the data correctly. So we fixed that.
Wow. You had to rewrite software?
No, it was just whatever the software developer didn't have the right button or checked. And
You mean that was something that occurred inside Plymouth Township, or it's the person we bought the software from?
bought the software.
Outside.
Oakland County.
As I understand it, had to do with the reporting side of things,
Clemis?
so-
This is Clemis? No other departments noticed it either?
Not that I know of.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
This particular report that we gave to Plant Moran.
Chief?
Sorry. The particular report we give to Plant Moran was not a report we run often. We run numerous reports often. This was a report we found that showed those concurrent runs. I don't run this report. Well, I didn't run this report prior to this monthly, but now I've started doing it.
And again, that's why we had Plant Moran go over the numbers so that we were dealing, we wanted to have it fact-checked and not just to have a, one-sided, or not one-sided, but not validated. So
The data before we discovered this understated, wait a minute, overstated the concurrent issues?
So if you look at, we'll just pick out one particular date there at the top of the list, which is June 28th. On that particular day, there were 4 concurrent incidences that were happening. It was a busy day. There were a total of 14 runs. So I don't know what happened that day, but accidents and other things were pretty common on that particular day. But because there were the 4 concurrent incidents, and you have the 3 stations, the 3 ambulances that can be deployed at any point in time, the way in which things were structured, that would be a date when you would need to get assistance, whether it be from HVA, a different ambulatory company, or through mutual aid. But that's an operational thing that would need to be taken into account. And a second point was brought up earlier that if there are, the 2 units being deployed for a single run, then you have the chance for all 3 stations to be emptied when there are just 2 runs. And so that's the second thing that obviously would need to be taken into account. So so assuming that those things can be addressed again either through a contract or through mutual aid, then the numbers would stand up.
So Scott, let's stay with June 28th and 28.4 total hours, and those total hours would increase if we did transport.
Correct. So using the example from earlier, if there was an incident and today it would end up in a transport, say to U of M, that would be your folks coming out to the incident and not doing the transport. So that would be, I don't know, what, a 20-minute, a 30-minute, whatever the number is, not the hour-long transport that was indicated earlier.
Okay.
And we didn't have data to look into exactly what those were. So our assumption is all things being equal and resembling what 2018 data looked like. That's the key criteria that we're using to extrapolate things. So the conclusion again was that 117,000 is what's collected today. That would increase up to 400. I'm sorry, an additional 496,000 would be collected at that average of $408 per run. So there is a substantial increase on the revenue side. Not that that's the only criteria, but I wasn't asked to look at the other criteria. And operationally, there would be, some additional costs that the chief had brought up. Those are not reflected in the numbers that we've shared today.
So Scott, based on those numbers, and you just did the 117,000, and we're talking direct entry or journal entry, 36 transactions for the 289 transports.
Mm-hmm.
So we're assuming those are journal entry transfers, multiples, probably from the collection agency?
We get from from MHR, we'll get a batch of checks.
Okay,
20 checks in a batch, that's one journal entry.
got it, okay.
But you never know how many checks are going to be in a batch. It could be 5, 10, 20. But anytime you get a batch of checks, we add them all up together, and that's one journal entry.
That's the Lansing company, Lansing-based company?
Bath, Michigan, yeah.
Bath? Well, that's BS&A. But
I misunderstood the question.
the company that's doing our billing is
sorry.
based in Lansing, right?
Correct.
Okay. You're confusing, the Bath is where BS&A is located.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Any further questions?
So you know normally, this is not part of your practice normally to be analyzing fire departments?
We do quite a bit of assistance with fire departments. Most of those projects that we've had we're looking toward things like a consolidation between, say, a city and a township to consolidate services.
But not, are you doing operational analysis, or is it mostly financial?
Both we do perform both. We do have a retired fire chief who actually reviewed this report as well as me, who does operational work as well.
Cool. So what's our bottom line again? If we transport, what are we looking at?
On the revenue side, $496,000.
Is that in addition to the roughly 115 that we're doing now?
And additional, correct. So roughly $500,000 of additional revenues in the general fund.
Okay, so I'm having the math issue is we increased the township fire department by 6 heads, $600,000 in payroll at today's wages. And we're going to, then we have an opportunity to collect an incremental $500,000.
I can't speak to the 6 positions. Was that a recent decision?
Yes, in the last 18 months.
Okay.
So, I don't know if it's a business decision, an operational decision. There's a lot of issues here. And I just handed out to you a report that was done in 2010 by
Chuck, where did you get this document? I'd like to have it. Could you authenticate this for me?
Yes. I'll get you the PDF tomorrow.
Okay, where is it from and who created it and where did you get it?
I got it from the city of Plymouth. They paid to have it done.
Okay.
The ICMA study?
Yes. It was in 2010.
And Chuck, from a procedural standpoint,
that's just their opinion.
If this was a courtroom, I wouldn't admit this, okay? Because
but this isn't a courtroom.
I understand that. I said if.
Study session.
Here's the situation, though, Chuck. This is now like the 5th or 6th time you've done this. Introducing information like this at the board meeting, at the table, I don't appreciate it, okay?
Really?
Our boards,
I thought we were doing a study session.
Our agendas come out many days in advance. We put a lot of time into it.
I just got this.
We get them out. I don't care. So here's the situation, Chuck. I don't appreciate having things dumped on us at the meeting that is not appropriate. I'm letting it in tonight, but in the future,
record. This is
but in the future, you've got to bring these things to our attention, just like we do with you with the agendas, okay? We give you information 3, 4, 5 days in advance. I'd just appreciate the same courtesy. This is a document that was prepared in 2010,
right?
And you just got it today.
Yeah.
From who? Where'd you find it? Under your bed?
Yes.
Really? Okay. Wonderful. All right. So what is this?
He's got it at his house, I think.
So what does this wonderful document say? I don't know. I haven't had time to read it.
I was going to explain what it said.
Okay.
I am going to do this from memory because I haven't looked at it in several years, but it was a study that was commissioned by the city prior to their divestiture from our operations. I thought it was very credible. I was actually part of the subcommittee that went and talked to these people afterwards. And quite frankly, I thought I was going to show up and have a couple of amateurs and One of them was a professor of mathematics at Wayne State. One of them was a professional out of Florida who had 40 years of public safety history. And, you know, I thought they was very credible. Now, you can argue the results, but what they do say in here is that the problem with transports is that it pulls people out of the community and they're not available for fire suppression. But the ICMA study, I mean, it's a little dated. It was
10 years
old.
ago, so it's a 10-year-old document,
Yeah.
probably based on 11 or 12-year-old data. Okay. I mean, submitted for what it's worth, I guess.
But
Well, it's a
realistically,
bit-
it makes sense, because if
and
I'm
this-
transporting, I'm out of the community.
And so this was
Kurt, it's
the,
no different than
so
somebody
is-
bringing an article out of the newspaper and distributing it. You guys do that too. We all do that.
Yeah, and well, we do it if we're trying to make a point. So the situation, though, is Bob, you were there apparently, so was this the document that was the precursor to the city's divorce from the township on fire?
I think it
I
had
wasn't
an
on the board,
impact.
so I don't know.
Because they talked a lot, what was interesting was they talked a lot about the time, that they were exploring the concept of public safety, and that's when you cross-train. So in some communities, I think they had started, there was a community in, I think, Dade County, Florida, that was testing this, because you can put fire suppression gear like in the back of an SUV, and, you know, and that was one of the things they were exploring, was this idea of cross-training. But as it turns out, you know, cops were willing to put out fires, but firefighters really don't want to be cops.
Understood. So what was the upshot of the study done by the city? Do you think it put the township in a favorable light or unfavorable light? Was it being used as an excuse or pretext to
No.
effectuate the divorce?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it. I don't think that was that. I mean, they left for a lot of reasons, and well, quite frankly, they left primarily because of the people that were here on this board at the time. That was really the main reason they left.
Also, defined benefit pension and the
Well,
costs
they
associated.
pension. There was other things, but they. I think it was just data. It was an interesting study. You know, like any study, you can find things to criticize.
Chief, were you around for that study? Do you want to weigh in on that?
I was around for the study, and yes, the city did use that study at the same time that they, as you notice, it was 2010, shortly after the study. Again, I'm not making any things, but shortly after the study, they told us they wanted to separate. Interestingly enough, they did not follow the study. They did something completely outside the scope of what the study suggested. The city has recently done another ICMA study with, and I don't know if they've actually, I don't think they've published the official results yet, but a draft version is available, and it has options again for the city. Whether they go to them or not, that's their business. But if you wanted my armchair quarterback, I think it was a tool that the city used to validate the decision they had already made to separate from the township.
Yeah, I don't agree, but I can't. I was in meetings you were not in. Let me just put it that way.
Well, anyway, it's a data point. I respectfully disagree with the concept of bringing in data that you find, even if it's at the last minute. You know, this is a discussion. It's not a court or whatever, but it's just another data point that we can think about that adds to the pile that we have. You know, you gave us,
And I think
50 pages, right? And you did give it
4 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can attach the appropriate weight to whatever has been given to us tonight.
So, Chief, the resolution, we've been talking a lot today, assuming that we would take over transports 100%. The resolution doesn't say that. The resolution says we will carve out a geographic area and then negotiate the rest.
The resolution states that that HVA or perhaps another operator would handle transport for areas outside of a designated area that the chief would determine from time to time. The terms from time to time are a legal term of art that just means that you will do it when you feel necessary. But, you know, hospitals could open that we don't know about yet.
And hospitals could
There's
close.
hospitals opening up all over the 275 corridor right now, and hospitals can close, you know.
When I first started here, Briar Hospital, some of you may remember it, that was a hospital we transported to. It doesn't exist anymore. But in reference to the geographical area, what that refers to is the area I said I determined within 20 miles. The hospitals within 20 miles will go to those. Anything outside of that area, if a patient calls 911 and wants to go to, for example, Beaumont Royal Oak, Plymouth Township is not going to take them to Beaumont Royal Oak. This is no longer an emergency. This is exactly what HVA has gotten into the business to do, and we will contact them to transport to this farther away hospital.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I thought it was saying we would carve out Lake Point and then everything else would be HVA. Okay.
That's how I read it also, yeah.
Okay.
What do we want to hear
Okay,
from?
so Chief, you want to, Plant Moran guy, are you,
Scott.
are we done with you now?
I guess
Thank you.
I guess if you want to just see in the end, I did provide maps all to the hospitals in question so that you could see what we're talking about. I used Bird School, 220 North Sheldon Road, as the midpoint of the township as a fair representation. When that put University of Michigan Hospital in, it also put Henry Ford West Bloomfield in. They're both the same distance away. A lot of patients like to go there. We like to take the patients where they'd like to go. And based on need and, you know, how well a hospital is doing, I'm sure patients will flock to this hospital versus this hospital because of, as Trustee Dorshevitz alluded to, their personal preference. You know, and Trustee Kermey also said, you know, he has a personal preference that he doesn't want to go to a specific hospital. We don't want to limit our patients to, you know, only one hospital. There are some communities that do that. Some it's just, that's the way it is. I mean, if you were in West Branch, there's only one hospital within 100 miles. I mean,
So we would have made an extra $500,000. I see there's someone here from HVA. How much did you make off those 1,217 runs?
Well, I'm sure they're going to be speaking later, Jerry, so why don't we'll bring them forward, okay? All right.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to
on the
start
agenda.
quizzing. Well, they have an opportunity to speak just like anybody else, so. Okay. So Chief, anything else you'd like to share with us? There's a lot of documentation in front of us, we understand that. But is there any other things that you would want to point out at this time?
no, but I'm happy. No, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have on this. Again, I think this is an improvement. I think this is going to be a much more efficient system. Right now, we have multiple ambulances running throughout the community, every single run. Again, this is not an indictment of HVA, and I do not want to even say that, but they have had ambulance get hit and roll over in this community. It's just the nature of the beast when you have so many vehicles coating around, and you know, we want to try to limit that. We want to try to limit the amount of people touching a patient. Some of our patients don't want a house full of people to hear their whatever problem they're having that day. I mean, a lot of this is personal. You don't want, you know, 8 paramedics in there. You know, we do respect that. We try to work together, but you know, we do have to pass them off to the transporting company to take them to the hospital. That's the system that was designed here. And
we can do it with current staffing?
We can do it.
We can do it with current equipment?
We can do it with current equipment. We have the ambulances, we have the staffing, and...
Are you willing to resign if you come back in a year and say, I need 10 new firefighters?
You want to shake on it? I'll shake right now.
He's ready to retire.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
I
just
think
saying,
Trustee Kermey's point is valid. I have been here
Are
for
you willing to
27
resign if
years.
somebody dies?
Well, that's the whole idea, right? I want to make sure our citizens are covered.
I
If
thought
this
that was,
board does not want me here anymore, I will walk
wasn't
out
that
right
the argument
now.
on the ladder truck, I thought, if somebody dies? So now somebody's got to die. Okay, whatever.
Again, at the very least, we became paramedics in 2000, and we have never gotten the full chance to do our job. If you want to make an agreement, give us a chance to do our job.
But Chief,
Give us a
today,
chance to.
you could take anybody you want to the hospital. Today you can, right?
I can, but I'm a good soldier, and I want to do what my board wants me to do,
So
which
where
is
is-
why
so-
I'm
so-
bringing this to the board.
Chief.
Because you are elected by the people to make these decisions, and I respect that.
So, Chief, where is
And
the current
I don't want
policy?
to be
Show-
an underhanded guy and do something you don't want me to do.
Understood, Chief, and that's honorable, but where is the current policy?
The current policy is
Written down in here.
Well,
Is that a board resolution?
no, that's an operational procedure which was last updated by me.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm trying to get to Gary's question. So, I mean, we could do a resolution, a policy resolution that would mandate you do all the transports and somebody raised the issue about the on-scene judgment where, you know, if you guys determine on the scene that this person needs transport,
HVA's 10 minutes away.
Do it.
You take them. And
Then
guess
do it.
what? If it's me, you take me.
With that being said, why would HVA enter in a contract with us if we started to do that? And again, before coming to the board, I think it's important that we bring this all out in the open and everybody understands it.
Absolutely.
well, I
And
think
that's why I'm here.
I think because they want to have a presence in the region. They know that political winds change and they might be back in business again, like they were before.
What?
I mean, I don't know people who walk away from business deals where it may, you know, impact their reputation in a community, which would be Western Wayne County, Washtenaw, et cetera.
Well, they're pretty entrenched. Less than a mile away from here, they have a big building.
Well, and that's
City of
in the
Plymouth.
city of Plymouth. And
That's true, yes.
the city of Plymouth has a fire EMS model that I would not support. So,
Well, a lot of people are lining up, and their houses sell for 30% more than ours.
well, it's probably because they're our outstanding school district and the fact that they do provide a lot of services that we don't provide. So, and they're willing to pay for it. It's a free country. Okay, Chief, don't go away. All right, Plant Moran guy, I think you're. I think.
Wait a minute, we have somebody over
Why
here.
don't you hang around? Why don't you hang around just in case? You're still on the clock. Okay. Board members, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Supervisor?
Oh,
I
Chief.
just need to clarify the dispatch component in this. Listening to everything, the Chief Phillips and I met with the dispatch supervisor today. There will be challenges, none that we don't think we can overcome, but there will be incremental costs, we believe, in dispatch. If we were going to do it today, we would probably be asking to increase our PSA staff by at least one. We would have to put in a third radio station, which we, of course, would have liked to have done many years ago. We have it wired to do it. It would be probably a cost of about $60,000. There's some additional training costs.
I mean, 60,000 in capital?
Yes. There's some ongoing training costs, and of course, our PSA staff would like to be compensated if we, you know, and that would have to be negotiated, but they indicated that they feel if we're going to go to transport and they're going to become EMDs, that they should be compensated for it. So all of those things would have to be negotiated. I say there's challenges because we've been doing it one way for so many years.
That's right.
I think we could overcome all those challenges, and we could make it work if that's the decision of the board. But it's not going to be status quo. There will be an incremental cost to it.
Okay, fair enough.
See, you'll accept that. That's new information that got dropped on us.
Well, that's the police chief is sharing his opinion with us.
No, he shared facts.
Don't go there.
Were you making those numbers up? That was real. All right.
Well, we appreciate that, Chief, because that's what we pay you for, so that's good. Okay,
But I do want to thank the chief, because I was reviewing all this stuff as we were putting the package together, and when I asked for more data, he went and got more data and put it in. So I want to thank him for being responsive to putting together a good package.
Which chief are you talking to? Oh, that one. All right.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Now from the public. Mr. Zantop. And we are going to observe the 3-minute rule here.
I have a couple questions. I'm curious if they could bring them.
Get closer.
If you could bring up the screen that showed how many transports we made to the different hospitals and who did those.
You mean the pie chart?
Yeah. And then I was curious about what the cost would be. Who determines the cost, what we charge, and what Huron Valley charges now. And my daughter had a serious injury last Sunday, and she refused to let me call an ambulance because she didn't want to go to St. Mary's. So my wife drove her to, I wasn't decent at the time, so I couldn't drive her, but my wife drove her out there while I got dressed and went out there. But she did not want to go to St. Mary's. I'm just wondering how many times that happens. How many times people refuse to go to St. Mary's. Is that the only place we can take people?
Chief, you want to comment on that? I don't know.
I can't comment exactly on your daughter's, but if she had a life-threatening emergency where we would take her to St. Mary's, but if she said, I want to go to St. Joe's, we would have taken her to St. Joe's. And if she would have said, that's in our...
So then does she pay, do we pay for that, or does the insurance pay for, how does that work?
Insurance pays for that. If you turn to page 98, there's a fee comparison that was created in 2017 by this board. And as you'll see, I can tell you what our fees are. I cannot tell you what HVA's fees are because they have not shared those with us. Page 98, there's a fee comparison. Plymouth Township residents pay less than non-Plymouth Township residents. Here you go. So this would be the fee, and it's based on the level of service that she would receive. So if it's an advanced life support run, it would be for a Plymouth Township resident, $550 plus $12 of mileage. If we used oxygen, that would be added on. But that would be the cost that would go to the insurance company, and she would only pay her deductible.
Okay.
Okay, the third line up, the treat, no transport, the $300, how many of those are you collecting in 2018?
Right now, we don't even bill those because HVA does all those, and they bill for those. So if we're there treating, generally speaking, HVA is going to get there. We're going to use their drug box, their equipment. So we don't bill those right now.
But HVA does.
HVA does.
Okay.
Just one other thing to share with you. On Saturday, my mother had a stroke. So I think it was HVA was driving her to the hospital, and she's 94 years old. She looked up at the driver and says, "You could lose 10 pounds."
You could do what? What did he say?
You could lose 10 pounds.
Okay.
That wasn't in Plymouth, though. We're all physically fit here.
Robert Harris, Township Resident. 2 comments. Number one, and I read Mark's report. It's a very nice report. He was very careful to say he looked at the revenue side. And what needs to be done is a decision analysis. And you were careful to point out that wasn't a decision analysis. For example, to do an extra 1,200 runs, forget how many people you have now, how many you had, how many you need, what's the head count required to do 1,200 extra runs? That
Not runs,
needs
you mean
to be in the
transports.
analysis.
Transports.
Not saying, you can't say, I don't need anybody because I'm overstaffed and I got enough to do all this extra work. It's how many heads, what's the head count required to do those extra runs? I'd like to see that analysis.
Can I address that?
Absolutely.
Okay. These are not extra runs. That's the first thing that we have to clarify. These are runs we respond to. We go to now. We're there. doing it, and we're doing it with 24 guys.
But you're not taking them to the hospitals.
We're not driving them to the hospital. That's correct. So when you say extra run, it's not an extra run. We're there, we do all the work.
Okay.
Some of those runs, we do ride in the back of the ambulance with HVA. I would say it's not many, 20 to 30 a year. I've been off the road for quite some years. Is that number right? 20, 30? More? Okay. So not more. The difference in time here is, I talked about this in our previous thing about this, is the drive time to the hospital. And if you remember those numbers, 11,000 of those went to St. Mary's. 1,100.
1,100.
1,100 went to St. Mary's, which is, depending on where you are in the township, roughly 6 to 10 miles away.
Okay,
So it's
understood.
not a lot of time.
Understand.
It's about 10 to 15 minutes extra per run.
Okay. But this is an important decision, and
It
we need,
is, and
we
that's
need
why
to
I'm
lay
here.
out all the costs involved. And number two, I am bothered to hear about the relationship problems between the township and HVA is probably our most important supplier in the township. I mean, it's life and death stuff. And if we should be able, they're run by professional management, we're run by professionals, and we ought to be able to sort out any operational issues. Just sit down and work it out.
I wouldn't be here today if those would have been addressed in the last 5 years like I've tried.
Okay, well, that's not good enough. We got to sort those out. And a contract, it boggles my mind that we do not have a contract.
Mine too.
Well, and furthermore, one of the things we asked for when we did look at HVA was we asked that they come to us with pricing. If they want to raise their rates, they said they didn't
Well,
want to
but
do
it's
that.
just, it's also roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
Here's what you're going to do, here's what I'm going to do. And just
Okay.
make it all clear in its contract.
Okay.
So
Very good. No,
that's my 2 cents.
thank you. No, appreciate it. Thank you. Next. What?
Took
He's
cuts.
bigger than you.
Took
I don't know.
cuts.
No, he's bigger than you.
Sorry.
Robert Weiland, Plymouth Township residents. If the fire department wants to transport, I have no problem with that, but the problem I have is they do not have the staffing to do it. I'm concerned about, right now, if the township runs lots of accidents on the freeways. And when they run on the freeways, they have 2 stations respond, one with an engine, one with an ambulance. They have another medical, that another station goes out, so there's nobody in the stations. Under the current model, I can expect them to, be back in the station at about 20 minutes, and that'll change to 3 times that amount if they're transporting. And there would be no fire suppression at the stations either. So for my own safety, I'd like to have a station that has people in it 2 to 3 miles from my house instead of working with, a mutual aid that's coming from 4 to 5 miles away. And that's just, if I'm having a heart attack, the first 5 minutes are what counts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann? Come on, hurry.
Mary Ann McLaren, Mark Trail, Plymouth Township. For the short person, right. Yeah, couple questions, just trying to understand. Okay. I think I kind of heard part of that from Fire Chief. How often do the firemen go with HVA for transport?
I mean, how many times
How
per
many?
year?
Yeah, well, yeah. Is that all? Okay. Transport usually takes 2 paramedics. If it's a cardiac arrest, is it 4? 3?
You need 3?
I don't know.
Why
To go in the ambulance?
Chief, why don't you ask? I'm not qualified to answer that question, so.
I'm adjusting, okay.
Just to answer your question, in the past, we've sent 4 firefighters or 4 paramedics to the hospital for a cardiac arrest. And this is when we're pumping on the chest. I don't know if you guys remember, but just about a year ago, we got what was called the Lucas 2 device. That is the thumper that is thumping. This has made our operations so much more efficient than a lot of surrounding communities, because now most of the work on a cardiac arrest is being taken place by a machine. And that machine is doing a better job than a human can do for longer. And quite frankly, my firefighters are reporting to me that this machine is doing great work. And we have 3 of them here. We got them by a grant that I wrote a couple years ago.
Then that negates my question that if you had a cardiac arrest and you need 4 paramedics, you got 2 stations empty. Okay. I'm still not sure. Chuck made the comment, I think if I got the math right, $500,000 potentially in income from transport to bring in 6 new firefighters, $600,000. That sounds like we're in a deficit of $100,000. So
We've already hired those firefighters, so I don't know where that number came from.
I was just checking on that.
It came from, nominally it costs $100,000 with benefits and salary to hire a fireman. We hired 6 in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are being paid for by a SAFER grant.
Okay. So we're still, okay. We still be paying for them whether we transport or not.
We're paying for them no matter what.
Right.
Correct.
And now that we
It's a
have
fixed
the
cost.
staffing, we believe that we can provide transport.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Good evening. My name is Ron Slagle. I'm the president and CEO for Huron Valley Ambulance. Just have a few things I wanted to add here this evening. Making a decision for Plymouth Township Fire to routinely transport all patients without the HVA transportation partnership, we believe reduces the vital core functions of the fire and rescue readiness. Residents now receive a response from 3 open fire stations, 1 for every 5 square miles here in the township. You've worked very hard to do this, and your residents have supported you. The ratio is excellent, and it makes responses to emergencies, whether a fire or a medical, better than most communities in Michigan. Why is this important? For these instances when lives are at stake. Rescuing a person from a burning building, defibrillating a patient whose heart has stopped beating, or rapidly extricating a patient from a vehicle following a crash where their life is in danger. By staffing and operating your 3 fire stations, township residents have the best chance to survive a fire or a medical emergency, except when your fire crews are busy on other calls or are transporting patients outside of the township. As we've heard here tonight, if you transport a patient, your ambulance must leave the township, and these transports generally take 45 minutes to an hour before the rescue unit returns to the township. And according to the 2019 Fire Department statistics, this will happen annually about 1,500 times, or about 4 times a day. According to the Plant Man report, there were 45 times in 2018 that 3 or more responses happened concurrently. And there were 237 times that 2 or more responses were required at the same time. What happens when a structure fire occurs and 2 township ambulances are on calls? Unlike the current model, the ambulances can't leave the patient. The Plant Man report also only did a financial analysis. It did not evaluate the impact on fire operations. Currently, 2 HVA and 2 fire department staff respond to medical calls. The proposed change would only send 2 firefighter paramedics, but there will be times, as we've talked this evening, that more personnel would be needed for one call, such as critically ill patients or vehicle crashes. The report lists 3 options to manage those times when more than 3 ambulances are needed. 1, increased fire department staffing. 2, increased reliance on mutual aid. And as we've already discussed tonight, Plymouth Township Fire gives out substantially more mutual aid than it receives. Or rely on HVA or another private provider. If HVA will no longer be your primary ambulance service, we cannot commit to being your 3rd level backup resource. This would not be fair to our other community partnerships. If HVA does not do the job well, you can select another provider. Last year, HVA customer satisfaction here in the township was 94%. If this proposed change doesn't work well, it will be very difficult to replace your fire department as the ambulance transport agency once you make this decision. We've talked that there isn't a contract. That's not for lack of trying. With previous boards, we've attempted to have a contract. They did not want to offer one. We believe that continuing your partnership with HVA remains the best option, as we have for the past 29 years. You will maintain a 24/7 response for emergencies from all 3 fire stations, which is vital in cases of cardiac arrest or fire rescue situations. The fire department remains capable of transport if HVA is unable to respond in a timely manner or in cases of system overload or disasters. And your fire engines or ambulances will almost always stay within the township borders, ready to respond locally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is
How
that-
much did you
is
make?
that
For,
written
how much
down?
did you make? How much did you make on the 1,200 and whatever it was, 217 runs? How much money did you make on that?
So the Plant and Moran data of about $408, $410 a call is pretty consistent. That was what I'm looking for. Consistent across all ambulance services because Medicare, Medicaid, and Blue Cross pay us the same no matter what we charge. So we get the same amount of money. So it'd be the $408 times those 1,200 ones. And it really doesn't matter who does that. That's the revenue you'd get.
Okay, thank you.
What you just said, is it written down? May I have a copy?
This?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can provide this to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Mack with the Fire Department again. Mr. Supervisor, you had a question about recruitment and retention, correct?
Yes.
That you directed to the fire chief.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on this. I have had newer employees come to me and request that, we do transport, and they did state that it is going to be a deciding factor whether they stay here or not, as if this transporting does take place. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
So it is a labor and bargaining issue. So we're in contract talks, so maybe we should discuss it then. In exchange for us doing this, are you willing to do something different?
I don't understand your question.
Nor do I.
It's in the labor contract.
Correct.
And you just said that it has an effect on employee morale and retention.
I said it has.
So we're going to
on
negotiate.
recruitment and retention. I've had employees come to me, newer employees, and state that they have a problem if we don't transport. This is something that they want to do. I just wanted to pass that on to
Yeah,
the board.
I heard you. So what
So
you're
are they
saying
threatening us, or
is it
I'm sorry?
are they threatening us?
No, I'm giving you information
Right.
that has come to me
I
that I
appreciate
think you need to have.
good? So then it's a negotiating bargaining unit item.
I don't know how you negotiate that, but
Yeah,
I'm open to suggestions.
I don't either.
Okay.
I recently went to Staff Command about 2 years ago now. I wrote a paper based on recruitment and retention. The recruitment and retention, when I did my surveys of high school students, and it wasn't in this area, it was in Dexter, just because I had easy access to those students. When I asked the question of, out of 120 students, what do you want to do when you grow up? Out of 120 students, there wasn't one in that pool who stated fire department or police. I just think you should know this. I know it's a different area. It's really heavily medical and stuff like that in the Dexter area. But this is something that concerned me, and it concerned the entire staff and command class. So I think you should know that.
Thank you. Okay. Mary?
I had a few comments noting that Huron Valley is a nonprofit ambulance service. Also, I see their ambulances frequently in the community out and about when I'm driving. They're parked, they're driving around, and they are in the township. Also, Beaumont Health is also a nonprofit organization. Ambulance services and their presence cost us nothing right now, zero. And they're here for us. Why not keep them here for our safety, especially when disasters occur or multiple accidents and events that need more staff to respond to the emergencies. When it comes to where an ambulance is and its arrival time, that was discussed earlier, not knowing where they are. Seems like Uber has this figured out. Why, and knowing exactly when your Uber is going to arrive and where it is on a map, why can't we do this for ambulance services?
Good point.
It still sounds like the proposal is highly focused on how much money the township can make by doing transport and not on safety. The citizen committee that studied this and presented at an earlier meeting stated that about 50% of runs go unpaid. How is this good for our township, and where does this go from there? Might we see an increase in unpaid runs that we have to cover? A detailed financial feasibility study needs to be conducted by those with economic experience and research of all related expenses. The Plant Moran study did not fully encompass everything that should be considered. This proposal weakens our safety by taking our firefighters outside of Plymouth Township. We did not want this. We are not safer when they are gone. Please keep our firefighters in Plymouth Township.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Rich Child. First, I'd like to thank you all for doing this tonight because it's enlightening to see both sides, but I would also like to say to Mr. Heisey, I think that any information that can come here is important, and your uprating Mr. Kermey, personally, I feel was out of order. All of us need information so that we can make good decisions when we're moving forward. Now, I was writing a bunch of notes, and I'm just going to be quick. I think you've heard it from other people. It seems that mutual aid appears to be problematic, not helpful for our community. With that being said, I can understand why the chief is more interested in trying to bring the transport in-house. But Mr. Clinton asked the right question. Mr. Kermey was asking what Mr. Clinton had said, where's the incremental cost? And I've heard that come up a couple of times here. I do think that the presentation that's being made, we're seeing numbers, but I'm trained as an economist originally, and one of the things that they put in front of us early on in my studies was a book that was called How to Lie with Statistics. So take that as you will. I appreciate the data, but you need to be able to parse the data. And data gives us one thing, but what we're talking about here today is public safety. Data doesn't necessarily translate into public safety. I think there are a lot of questions that have been presented that need to be given thoughtful, just take your time with it. I'm glad that there's no vote tonight. I will say that. A lot of the stuff that was on the board here, I would rather have had the opportunity to peruse. And I agree when you say that. No,
been online since Thursday evening.
Okay. I'm a working person too. I've been putting in 11 to 15 hours the last 5 days. I haven't had the opportunity to peruse 120 pages. Much of it was here tonight. I appreciate it was here from all you guys. But let me just read through it. I want to look at a couple more. We've talked about the incremental current staff. They're all ALS trained? Okay. You talked about continuity of care with your patients. What I keep hearing, and I know it was presented by a number of the board members, to me it sounds like you have some serious communication issues that should be able to be dealt with. I don't understand when you're telling me that there's been 20 plus years of this, why you can't figure out or bring someone in to help develop something so that that communication is not a problem. That seems to be part of this discussion tonight. That's about it. My last one was just I'm going to say what I wrote down. I said doublespeak. I keep looking at which is it. Do we need more staff to cover the runs? Back to the incremental question. Yes, you have staffing right now, but if we don't need to increase staffing in order to handle the new runs, it sounds to me like perhaps we have too much staff right now. And I like the fact that we have a community where I've had a house fire. I've had my wife had to be transported in an emergency situation. I liked that there were two options when they showed up because I took her to U of M or she'd have been dead 20 years ago. Mary said it a moment ago. I just think having a backup makes sense to me. taking it on, but, enough said. That's my
Okay.
thought.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Eileen Coleman. I just wrote down a few thoughts I had prior to coming. A lot of them have been addressed, but I also do not care for the interactions of you guys and disrespect among you. You are here to dialogue, to come to the common good. So when somebody brings something to enter, it should be accepted. He's just trying to bring something that's pertinent to what you're considering. You haven't made a decision yet. So be respectful at minimum to one another, because everyone sees it. You cannot hide your behavior. So the question I have is from Huron Valley. They said there's a 94% satisfaction with the residents. That's telling. That means they're happy with the service that's being presented right now. So the object of change, even though you have communication difficulties with Huron Valley, perhaps those can be overcome, but you are pleasing the residents right now. They are the ones who elected you. They're happy with the service. I think there should be a more thorough analysis between the two systems. Place it up, compare and contrast. This is what HVA does. This is what the firefighters intend to do. They're not doing it now. What they intend to do. Side-by-side comparison. Cost, efficacy, all of that. Not just jumping around from one thing to another. These are serious decisions. These involve life and death. Timing is essence. You get someone to the hospital 1 minute late, they can die. So you don't have time to be thinking, I need to be doing fires and I need to be doing transport. No. You need to focus on transport when you are doing transport, because you do have life and death in your hands. I am a nurse. I have seen it. Poor decisions made with HVA or firefighters can mean someone dies. The other thing is, in the report, there was the rationale for switching. There was a financial rationale, an operational rationale, a liability rationale, a customer service rationale, and a response rationale. I'd like to know what that all means. Financial, okay, we're going to make $500,000. Operational, I would like that all spelled out. Spell all of that out. A thorough comparison of costs to the residents, long-term, short-term, union, pension, everything, just spell it all out. Compare. HVA has at-will employees. They can be fired anytime. They don't perform, they're gone. Union, not so much. We currently, as taxpayers, don't pay for HVA training. They train their employees. They provide their equipment. We don't pay for their equipment. And the other thing that I was thinking is, in hospitals, you have all this very specialized care. So you have a cardiac team, you have a code team, you have IV team. This HVA is specialized. This is what they do. They transport. That's their whole focus. They study how to do it well, and they do it well. They've served this community. So I think before you consider switching, you need to do more study, more analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Are you coming forward to speak again, Mr. Zantop, or what? Okay.
I, too, am concerned about some of the disrespect that's shown towards board members. This is one of the reasons we got rid of the other board disrespect shown towards the public and other board members. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. Chief, anything else you'd like to add? Oh, no. You're good? Your voice is gone? Oh, see, we didn't get you water, that's why. Okay, then let's move on. Let's see. All right. So now we're at, pardon me, Chief? Yeah, supervisor and trustee comments. Bob? Gary?
Were we going to talk about the gift cards?
What is it?
Chief, you want to tell us the story about what Trustee Heitman did to prevent crime in the township?
Yes,
And does he need a pay raise now for this? I don't know. Is that
There's been
negotiable?
a union
He's
grievance
McGruff, the
filed
crime-fighting
because
dog.
he did perform the work of a police officer. They filed a grievance against him.
Yeah.
I say that in joke. But Trustee Heitman was at the Kroger.
You got to speak up, Chief. I can barely hear you.
I'm sorry?
That's better.
Trustee Heitman was at the Kroger store last week, and one of the managers called him over and said that there was a elderly lady in that had just purchased several Apple iTunes gift cards. Like she was trying to buy $6,000 worth of these iTunes gift cards. Gary was able to get the information to us quickly. We were able to go out to her house. She wasn't there. She had just from the Kroger store, she went out to Novi, out to 12 Oaks, and bought another $4,000 worth of iTunes cards. She had received a phone call, one of these phone call scams. Somebody identified themselves as an IRS agent and convinced her that she had to send this money in immediately or she would be arrested. So when she returned home, she had about $6,000 or $8,000 worth of gift cards that she was getting ready to forward on to the scam artist. So I'd like to thank Trustee Heitman for contacting us, and we certainly stopped a crime from occurring, thanks to Gary.
Well, the bad part is her neighbor knew she was out buying these cards. And
What do you do?
yes, he was elderly as well and didn't see a problem. But my point is, please, if anybody hears something like this that doesn't sound good, give the chief a call, give the police department a call, because right away, and Kroger is now going through an entire training for all of their employees that says if somebody's buying more than $100 worth of gift cards, we got a problem. Well, that's just Kroger. So, I mean, we got to make sure everybody goes through this, because right now it's getting worse all the time.
Help me understand this. She was going to physically give them to somebody?
No, they give them the number.
They give them the numbers.
Yeah, they would just give her them. They would call back. And
She would read off all those numbers?
Yeah, that's the scam. They say you must give us some money now. Go buy gift
$6,000
cards.
for a $100 card.
Was she
really
able to get a refund
Yes,
of that?
yes. We worked it out.
really sickening.
Refunded those for her.
Thanks.
Good job, Gary.
Deputy Dog Gary.
Well, you guys would have said the same thing, because it was, wait a
Oh, now you're done.
there's something wrong here.
The legal law.
Now you want to raise, probably, huh? You want to raise? That's probably it. Okay. Jerry Borva.
I'm good.
Okay. Next week, we will have our regular board meeting. It's May 14th, next Tuesday. We've got the Litchfield SAD hearing of necessity. We have some drug forfeiture purchases from the police department. That's money that we're using out of the drug forfeiture account. So we have to do that and make sure that that's all done openly and publicly. Budget amendments. We've got a bunch of budget amendments also. Maybe a couple other items, not sure as of now. So, Mark?
All set.
Jack? Chuck?
Speaking of Deputy Dog, I'm concerned about hacking at the township and ransomware. I want to understand, or we need to be protected from that, because apparently it's going on in a lot of medium-sized and even large cities.
You saw 60 Minutes on Sunday.
No, I heard it on the radio, and it made the light bulb go on. We need to make sure we're protected. And in light of what Mark said with the software at the bank, found a bad check that somebody was writing on our account. We need to be paying attention to it, so maybe our information systems person needs to be
Diligent.
He needs to come back to us.
The best way to protect yourself is to make sure you got good backups and you have multiple backups, because ransomware can happen. Somebody can click on a file attachment, and what it does, they send you an email. It's got a file in it. You click on the attachment. It encrypts all
your files.
All your files, and it happens to people at their homes, and all of a sudden all your photos have been encrypted. And, for $2,000, we'll give you the key to unencrypt them. And if you didn't have good backups, people pay it.
So from I want us to go through a due diligence and show documentation that we've done it. even if we have to hire somebody from outside to do it, if Bob can't do it.
We'll talk to Bob about it.
This is pretty high-tech stuff. You got to really know what you're doing, I guess, to defend yourself against this.
Yeah, it's the company I used to work for, a couple people got hit. They had, you know, they had their personal files, but we had good backup, so we were able to just restore.
Okay.
All right.
Comments or questions? No, we still have public comment. So comments or questions from the public on anything else?
Yeah, that's can't. And
Very
you don't
good.
Click on the
Mr.
tab.
Supervisor,
Number
I
one
move we
rule
adjourn
is
9:35.
Don't
Made by
click on an
trustee Heitman. Is there a
attachment
second?
unless
Second.
you're
Second by
sure you
clerk
know who
Dorff. All
it's
those in
from.
favor of
You'll
adjournment
get
signify
like
by
a
saying
spam.
aye.
Aye.
We are
You're
adjourned.
attached.